Everything was still there, and all the panels were still on the bloody panel.
There you go, that's about it. Nothing like that. Thank you.
If you've got the revenue tax, I can't. I know. I'm sorry. If you've been here, it was. Inside. Oh, yeah.
It's the start.
Just something, one thing.
I know. It's a crank.
A few meters of froth on top of the hole.
So see, we're going to go to watch this. I don't.
Now like that, was in the garden,
Yeah.
now go to the garden, because all you do now, just. But that's all, but yeah.
Even some fun.
Right, are we ready? Okay, nice and good.
Just.
That's my good morning, everybody. Welcome to this workshop. I've just discovered that you need a karakia, so I will say, and I come from the list. Tuia te tika, tuia te pono, tuia te araha, te ao marama. Weave what is right, weave what is true, weave with love to the world of enlightenment. And Donna here, so I reckon we're going to be feeling quite enlightened very shortly, with any luck, with the dream team. Fantastic, welcome, thank you.
Yes. Good evening, David. An ordinance now, pressure on us. Not sure with budgets is going to be doing that, but anyway, let's get into it. So we have the first line. So what we're going to talk about today is the overall budget increase, and that has been a moving piece since the last time we talked about 6 weeks ago. Where the increases have come from, and I was conscious of the fact that when we put that on the last PowerPoint, it was tiny. So we printed out the stuff that we'll be talking about in those two sheets, and hopefully it's a little bit easier to read. What we can pull, if any, around moving the rate number. I'm going to talk briefly about volumetric charges and the impact on rates, not the theory behind them, the ways we would do it. I think that's been discussed before, and that's a conversation that the Speaking Waters Director will be leading. Then we're going to be looking at sample properties, and there's a lot of data in there, and that's page 2 of that A3 handout. It is broken down in the PowerPoint, but I thought that it might be better to put it all in one spot as well, so that as we're going through and when you take it away, we can get a look at it. And then we're kind of open to questions. If there are any, there might be a bit of stun silence, but we'll see how we go. Okay, thanks, Wayne. Right. The average rates increase is 22.73% as we sit right now. Just remind the council that $525,000 represents a 1% movement in rates, either up or down. The 22.73 does include 1.29 million of debt repayment, but it does not fund any deficit accounts that you would have. So, and that's, we talked a little bit about that the last time I talked numbers, and there's probably 1 or 2% in that potentially. It includes the increases in volumetric charges from 60 cents inclusive of GST to $2.40 inclusive of GST. And it does introduce a corresponding reduction in fixed water charges. So we are seeing in this model fixed charges or variable charges, but the same amount of money is being collected to fund water. Are you assuming the same amount of water usage?
I covered that off, and I'll talk through that as we go through when we get into the detail of it.
Thank you.
Next slide, thanks, Wayne. So on the first page, and hopefully that's a little bit bigger than it was. You looked at it last time, but this sheet determines or shows you where the increases have come from. So we've got a 10-year picture. We've got of the 22.73, you can see each activity contributes an amount of money towards that rates increase. The three waters together is 35.6%. Sorry, that's the next sheet. I'll get to that in a minute. So it's about 7%, 7 or 8% is from three waters. You'll note that given that we have had 18.3% average increase this year, with the current budgets, we're looking at 22.73 next year and 12.9 the following year. And then it starts to taper off into fives and down to twos and threes. So first 3 years, effectively, if we were looking at the first 3 years and this annual plan was part of the long-term plan, you'd be looking at over 50% increase in, sorry, the 4 years, 50% increase in the rates from beginning of last year. And look, I'm happy to take questions if you think of something you might want during the presentation. We don't have to wait till we leave. Next slide, thanks, Wayne. So this slide shows you, and that was what I was alluding to before, the percentage of the 22.73, how much each activity impacts that increase. So that's where the 35% for the three waters comes from. When you add transport, so if we're talking about all of our core infrastructure, we're heading up towards 50% of our rates increase relates to infrastructure. That's kind of to be expected given the economics that we're facing in terms of price movements, etc. And it will also include things like being ahead of the NZTA funding, because NZTA are cutting that back, and there's an option there to maintain our levels of service by non-funded depreciation. Non-subsidised road work. So we kind of, that's where the guys have come from in that respect. But you also note pools, parks and cemeteries, that's 13%, and environmental services, where solid waste sits, that's 11%. And it remains at that high level in terms of percentage of the total increase. That continues at 11s and 10s right the way through the 10-year plan. And that's a function that solid waste is really expensive. It's costly to continue to rise on that.
Sorry, can I just ask that pools, parks and cemeteries includes waste? Is that what you're saying?
No, environmental services includes waste.
Okay.
Yeah, pools, parks and cemeteries is reserved.
Yeah, that's fine.
Now, these numbers, 22.73, includes the latest information that was presented to the Frommel community. So it does include the $750,000 in grants or potential grants, even though there's been no decisions made on that. We thought we'd put that in because the council will be needing to make a decision on it. So it's easy to put it in and take it out.
And it's also includes the rock, the whole,
Yep.
Pacific Town Council as well.
Yeah.
What you will consider this Wednesday. So that, we'll see that in this Wednesday, that the big policy numbers have been.
What's the grant yet?
But can you probably,
Oh,
yeah, yes, that was quite a lot of money to drop. Like, we're all quite comfortable that we had that conversation, but nobody else is aware of that. Right? So we're not charging another $750,000 for Cromwell stuff. Don't panic. You can ask you.
So I can talk to that obviously the councils around the table can as well. So to come to you guys next week is a recommendation from the, or two recommendations from the Common Community Board. One is to provide a grant for $250 million to the sports club to help with the remodeling there Anson Park. So that was considered first by the board back in February 2023, and they are wanting council to include that in the consultation document. The second one, which is, so that will be a request for district-wide funding on that one. The second one is for £500,000, up to £500,000. It's sort of been a late entry, is to provide a grant to assist a childcare centre. The board are supportive but want further information on that. So the board have agreed to have a meeting in early January and have asked the paper to come up. So that number could well shift. And what the board have recognised is that it's a particular challenge for the Cromwell area. So for that one, they are suggesting the come from the Cromwell residents and not the district funded. The councillors around the table, they have any further comments to add here?
The 250 for the sports club's been an ongoing, and as Cromwell, we weren't wholly supportive of that without it being in line with the bigger picture of the recreation plan and updates. So we've kind of stalled on that. They've got a little bit of money back with us that they can withdraw, but they want more basically to go and kickstart looking for other money. So that's where that's come from. Not necessarily that it's a given that we're going to give that, but that's what they're asking for, and we thought that that was appropriate. It comes to council. The other one was a very local thing that only pops up yesterday, didn't it?
Yeah.
And we haven't discounted it more so than have said we support it, but we need to include it if we do want to look at it. And it was basically to help buy property to extend the Cromwell Early Learning Centre, that they will buy a property next door and convert that.
Private provider.
So they,
For profit provider.
but it's how does it work with there? Because it becomes ours if they stop being.
They stop it.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure.
But it's their land, their
It's-
buildings.
Yeah,
So
they are in
they
rights, don't
own
they?
a piece of the property that the Cromwell Early Learning Centre is on, but in their constitution, because they're a not-for-profit community-based organisation, they've got a clause in their constitution that says if they cease to be an early learning centre, the building and the land would revert to council ownership, and they've been offered the piece of land next door.
Not necessarily something we will support, but definitely something, given that childcare is one of the major reasons people are leaving Cromwell.
I beg your pardon?
But the families that are moving in, that are coming to work, their wait lists are showing that the people are leaving because they can't get the childcare in time, and childcare lists are actually closed until kids are 2 or 3 now. So those families, I mean, it's like for Cromwell particularly, and that's what, if we recognise that as a solution to Cromwell, and we want to take them on as a district rate, as a ward rate, not a district one, then that was our conversation yesterday, which is why we came up to this little bit.
Most Cromwell so flush. Right, okay.
Must be something in the water.
It ain't gold. Yeah.
So the reason we've included it is so that we've got the complete picture, and it's, you know, won't say, if the council decides to do it, it needs to be included. So we've included it on the horizon, and there's still decisions to be made in the situation. Move on to the next slide, thanks, William, which is the dollar increases. So we're going from 52.4 million in rates to 64.3 million in year 1, 72.6 in year 2, etc. So that's kind of the complete picture in terms of the overall rates. And as I've said, the percentages and the likes are reflected from these numbers here. Yeah, so Wayne, the next one, thanks. Right, so then we looked at, so 22.73, what levers can we pull to reduce that if needed? And the first thing we talked about, and I think that was mentioned at a previous meeting, was depreciation, and this is not funding depreciation on Three Waters, given that the water assets potentially, and again, no decision has been made on the future look of water ownership. We have made an assumption that for the purposes of this presentation, that there will be a CCO that is created. It seems that is the the best model. We haven't worked out whether it's going to be a regional or standalone model. So we're just saying CCO, it's going to have a similar impact, I think. So what has been floated is that we fund 3 waters renewals from debt, and the council if the council decides to create a CCO. So we're not going to fund depreciation for the next 2 years. It does look attractive, as depreciation is about 9 million across all the water activities. So 18 million over the 2 years, give or take. That would reduce rates by about 17%. However, there are some significant, in my view, and the view of some other councils across the country. We had a discussion with the Waitaki manager of corporate services, who is a little bit further advanced in their process, and they've highlighted a couple of these drawbacks. So if we go to the next slide, mate. So if we take, by way of examples, assuming standalone/regional CCO scheme, currently our budgeted revenue across all waters is 23 odd million. Depreciation that we fund is included in that number of 9. The CCO, if it takes over in year 1 July 2027, and there's no change to the revenue line, the CCO has a budget of 115 million in terms of its debt, and that's based on its budgeted revenue. That's 5 times the budgeted revenue, and that's what LGFA have offered. So they've got 115 million, and we'd be transferring in 60, 70 million in debt. Okay, so near on 70 million would be transferred into the new entity if we continue to fund depreciation. So the LGFA are offering debt capacity of up to 500%. Council's contributions to a standalone or regional CCO will be 115 million in borrowing capacity, less any debt that we transfer in. So if we transfer in 70 million, that's 45 million in headroom that they've got to get on and do your work.
And I think it's fair to say too that in the presentation Ruben said to LGNZ that it's likely that it won't be 500%. It's more likely to be 400 and something %, because there were some other numbers that came into play that they were sort of expected it to be about 440, something like that would be where most water entities would probably prefer to sit if they were to go into debt levels. They would, you know.
That's the next slide, one, please. That's you. There you go. So if the council decided to fund renewals from debt rather than funding depreciation, you will get the following scenario. So your revenue is reduced by the amount of depreciation you're now not funding. Debt increases by that amount. So in this particular case, it would be 9 million for the next 2 years, so 18 million by the time we transfer it. So our budgeted revenue would drop from 23 to 14. Then at 500%, the CCO debt levels is now 70 million that we would contribute to a new CCO. And we're transferring in 70 million of debt. Actually, will probably be a little bit more than that because we've borrowed 18 million over the next 2 years. So effectively, rough rule of thumb is likely that the council's 3 waters debt would now exceed the transferred in debt capacity of the CCO. So they would be then relying on other councils who had debt capacity if we went into a regional space to cover our shortfall. I don't know whether that's the right word or not. But there will be an excess of debt potentially going in that another council, if we're in a regional space, would have to cover. If we're in a standalone space, that number doesn't go into. We would be capped at potentially 7 million and whatever we've got left. You have to work out how that is treated. So I guess what I'm saying is that, the movement of funded depreciation into debt is probably not going to help the financial sustainability of the new entity, whatever that might look like, whether it's regional, standalone, we're doing it, into the future beyond the transfer date. So
Just a question on that.
Yeah.
Because the water services entity has to be financially sustainable, so it can determine its own revenue. These numbers are predicated on our forecast revenue.
Yes. Yeah.
Because, I mean, looking at the Morrison Lowe's, what it's saying is that it will eventually charge ratepayers $4,000 a connection on rates, which means that their revenue is going up. So this works on the premise that the revenue that the water services entity is the revenue is a numbers what we're modeling, but they could, and looking at what Morrison Lowe said, they are upping the revenue to take into account this. Would that be?
Yeah, what I'm looking at here is that what we would have done is reduce our revenue.
That's right.
Down by 9 million in year one. Then we transfer the assets into the water services entity, and for them to start operating properly is probably efficiently, whatever, financially sustainable, they will immediately need to start replacing the revenue that we've dropped off to reduce the 22% rates rise. So potentially, if we, and it is the same rate page, you're exactly right, it's the same people paying it, but they may turn around, and I can't say what they're going to do. They may have to turn around and say, well, we're going to have to replace that 90 million on day one. Well, they might say we're going to go 4.5 in year one, 4.5 in year two, and then we're back where we were. And they are significant increases in charges to the consumer. Whereas if we left it at 23 million, we may not see such significant increases early on in the piece because there's sufficient revenue being generated to do what they need to do. And I'm not saying that they won't push the bills up to $4,000. It's just the case, I guess, the steepness of that increase over the time period.
So that's forecasted like over 9 years, looking at their model.
Yeah, but if they're going from, what's our current?
1,700.
Just under 2,000.
So they might be doubling if we kept our revenue at the current level, but if we dropped our revenue streams down by 9 million, then it's not 50 or 100% increase. It's going to be more like a 150, 200% increase to get from where they took over to where they need to be. So I guess that it's whether or not we're setting them up for larger increases over the same period of time. Whereas we've already kind of got the levels of revenue that we've got, and we've built those up over time. We've rated for stuff.
So you're saying the potential is TCO is that never mind the endpoint is probably the same every which way. The instance of rise is going to be a lot steeper earlier than the CCO.
No, actually, I'm not saying that. What I'm actually saying is that if we did this now, if this was one of the things that you considered to reduce rates from 22, we would need to, if we took it on, we would need to do that as well, because we would need to replace the revenue that we have. We could not keep borrowing money year on year to fund the capital expenditure that was funded by depreciation. So we would put ourselves into a significantly higher amount of debt if we were running it ourselves, and we would have to have the significant. I think we would have to have the reasonably significant increases to put us back where we would be.
Suffice to
what-
say, it's not good practice. But many councils did this in the lead up to the NTU transfer.
Yeah.
They stopped depreciating, and then it did come back to bite them because it was stopped in its track.
Why would the new entity not want depreciation as well? Because it'll just end up debt funding more debt in 30 years' time.
In the nursing no report, there's rates for each individual council, and when you look at that, it shows two lines. It's got the profile based on the funding program they gave them, and then it's got their one that they're calculating at. And in the one that I gave them, you see it's kind of it's more of a gradual line. It just carries on a gradual line. And in their one, in the first 3 years, that the cost of residence is lower, and then it steeply jumps in 2028. And when I asked them why is that difference, what's different about what I've provided versus what they did, they said it's because we were actually funding our depreciation, which actually made us not necessarily not an exception, but not a lot of councils are doing that. And so they had taken that out because the other council were covering the depreciation, and they had modelled it more consistently across other councils to show that they're really low cost for a couple of years and then will get suddenly jump up in 2028 when the depreciation has to come back in, because under the legislation, the definition of financially sustainable, you want fully implemented depreciation. Yeah. So that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about by the end low cost for a few years and then a big jump, or a smooth big jump.
Julie's put it a lot more succinctly than I was trying to put, but that's exactly what I was trying to say. But if you think about pulling out depreciation now, the impact on the water user is significant upfront rather than it being smooth, because the council our council is already funded depreciation. We are already in a position to say that we are collecting, and I think it's 20 million this year, it's going to 23 next year. We've already got 20 million in revenue coming in. So to move from, if we say 23 is what we're going to go from 23, which might be 2,200 or whatever it is, to 4,000 over 10 years. That's a lot less of an increase per year than going from something like 14 million in year one and then having to recoup what we've done in the previous 2 years. So they will be significantly steeper increases earlier on than they would be if we stayed where we were and allowed that to flow through.
Would it be fair to say that with that financial sustainability by 2028, to not fund it now is not putting it on to the ratepayers of the next generation, which is what would happen in the past, but it'll put it all onto the ratepayers of 2028 because that's when it needs to come in. So you would save some money in the short term now, but come 2028, it'll all go back on the bill plus whatever needs to be recouped.
That's what I believe will happen, and they'll have to do it because they'll have a program of work that they've got to fund in some way. Some of it will be funded through depreciation, and they'll have an amount of work that they've got to do on top of that that will be debt funded. And to doing that, the LGFA, the way they measure, the way they calculate your debt capacity is based on your revenue streams. So if you reduce your revenue streams, you reduce your debt capacity. That's something that we're going to have to deal with when 23 million drops out of the council's revenue streams. But we haven't gone into, the debt kind of is sitting with Three Waters as it should be, because that's what we've borrowed it for. Our debt capacity will go down as a council incorporated rather than council plus Three Waters. We kind of got this symbiotic relationship where we each use each other's revenue to be able to borrow whatever we need to borrow. But if we take 23 million out, well, when it comes out, then the corresponding level of debt capacity will come out of that as well. So, but what that is going to do, that's going to impact us year one, because we would have dropped 9 million out, and 9 million when we get our credit rating, it's going to be say at 250%. So that's going to be say $20 million of debt capacity that we lose because we've dropped out 9 million. Well, it's a bit more than that, but we've dropped out 9 million of revenue for the next 2 years. And we've also borrowed as well.
I'll just ask a question. So how can we do this and looking at a CCO going forward if everybody's not consistent in doing the same?
I think it's so, I think it's what that legislation's trying to address, to make everybody consistent. And interestingly, just legislation and the first reading yesterday, yesterday, Monday, that's what it's interesting that from 2027, you won't have, even if all the state and this council, BAU, you would have an LTP for council, you have no three rules in the LTP, you have a separate document that follows, that's called water services strategy, and it's effectively an LTP for 3 waters. So you have 2 separate ones, and your finances and all your 3 water stuff's in that one, and your other council stuff's in that one, and you can solve on both of those at the same way.
And does that mean you wouldn't be able to transfer your borrowing? The books are now separate.
Well, it's going to get interesting. I've got the fund. Not sure I understand, but they talked about ring fencing, and we sort of thought, oh, well, we could ring fence for them, the way we do it anyway, but they're actually separating. Yeah, so even if it stays in council, so the books will be different.
Paul, a couple of questions. What, because obviously year one has got quite a big rates increase compared to year 2. What would happen if we didn't debt fund in year 1, but we did in year 2?
In terms of the waters space, if you didn't fund it in year 1, then you'd be sitting at 22%, and then your year 2 would drop.
No, sorry, what I mean is the other way around.
Oh,
so,
okay,
yeah, so we don't.
We borrow in year 1.
Yeah.
And then we debt fund, we depreciation fund in year 2.
Yeah.
Okay, so what that does is that effectively pushes $9 million of revenue requirement from year 1 into year 2. So at 9 million is about.
So it just push up year 2.
You just push year 2 back up, yeah, and it would go up by not quite as much in terms of percentages, because you're now looking at a $630,000 equals 1%, but it would be a significant, it'd be probably about 15-16% you'd add to that 12.
And then what would happen if we say 50% debt funded instead of 100? So we, over the 2 years, we chose 50%.
I guess
100.
I guess you've got to think you're then that smooths the line for year 1. And reduces it. Year 2, because you're reducing it by the same amount, doesn't have any effect mathematically. But what you've then got to think about is that financially sustainable for a new entity, and how does that get? How does the DIA interpret that? So, I mean, those are
the interesting
can't
thing.
really answer that question.
It's, from what happens in Wellington is not all councils, some councils pay for renewals for revenue. And so they don't put money aside for depreciation like this council does. So that's a very good habit. There are councils in New Zealand that don't do that. And so the new rule that they'll step into when it comes to water services and all that sort of stuff will be a shock, because you will have to depreciate at the maximum money. And when some councils do part fund renewals and depreciation, because they don't do 100% depreciation, they might do 60%, 70%. And that's what a lot of councils did leading up to the transition. They either removed the depreciation of water assets completely or partially depreciated, because And yet there was probably more control by DIA and looking at annual plans and all that sort of stuff. They are a bit more rigorous. I haven't seen what the legislation says about that, but at the moment, this is the last lever you have to reduce your rates. This is the simple fact. That this is the biggest lever you have right now. So it's ultimately it's for you to
And it's
decide
reducing the rates that it will still have to be paid with, paid for
at a later date.
at a later date.
The DIA is not, and the legislation is not saying you must do it. There's, as Pete said, there's less control now than there was previously, but you can go into that, these audit entities, when you're setting up the CCOs, it's all around what you have to do in 2028. It's not saying you must do this or you must do anything, and then we don't. And look, there are other councils that we're talking with that are not fully funding the depreciation at all. They fund the renewal program as opposed to the depreciation. I don't close it anymore.
But the funding renewal should be foreign, could we?
No, I don't know how they fund it. I think they're funding the renewals from, instead of funding the depreciation, they fund the renewal program. So the renewal program is lower than what the depreciation would have been. So that funding is lower. You could say they're part funding the depreciation.
Is there a point between 23 and 14 where other districts will get to review that's transfer to the LTP?
What I would anticipate happening is that as we go into whatever entity we go into, and assume if it's a standalone, no issue, you've got it. It is what it is. But if it's a regional entity that's got more than, say it's 4 that are talking about it, and we'll put our assets in, we'll also put our pricing policies in. And what that may mean is that CODC's consumers are paying what we are charging them, and the increases for other councils who may not be funding depreciation may be significant for them as we move into, I'm not sure that it's going to be rates income harmonisation from day one. I suspect that what it'll be is that it will be kind of ring fenced, and you'd probably know more than I would, Julie, but I think it would be ring fenced by council to start with. And some of those other entities who come into that are going to, they may get a shock as they are, their particular ratepayers start to have increases that are significantly higher than our ones might do if we stuck with funding depreciation. And they'll probably be, I don't know, that'll be up to the directors and the owners of the directors of that, whether they start to harmonise water charges over time. And then, but I suspect that harmonisation happens to start with because of the disparity across the people who may go into that entity. Is that cover off what you're
To that, this conversation's seemingly however, what I would say you should be in mind that in the Morrison report, we're actually in a relatively good position compared to everybody else. And we've got a lower price point to what they're going to have. So while my gut tells me keep on doing the right thing and funding the depreciation, if we go on and CCO with others, you'll probably really feel better than you're already in a better place than they are. So you're probably going to get those increases coming in on that pathway to harmonisation, which might be over anyway. So this might be an occasion where you could take a bit of a win and maybe take a full win of 50% of the win, as Sally suggested. At the moment, we're just going back again to revisit those friends and this time. You're in there, so either in a multi-council CCRs or not, we don't retain the way as to what those whereas the others here, something like they have reductions if they go into it, which kind of makes me more.
I guess the other thing is if we were to depreciate and keep going down that road and doing all of that, and then we given, and if we went into a CCO, a joint CCO, at the point, and this might be trying to crystal ball gaze here, at the point where they start talking about animalisation, is there going to be any, I guess, negative or effects on Central Otago residents because we've done the right thing over that time when we get to that animalisation discussion? Like, are we going to be, negatively affected by that?
I think it's fair to say that, in harmonisation, there's going to be winners and losers. But at the harmonisation point can be determined by the shareholders that make up the water services. So it could be at year 10. By then, with the water regulation and the financial regulation kicking in at 2028, we're all on a steep price point after that, because that's what it's going to need to sustainably fund waters going forward. So there's probably a valid argument that by year 5 to 10, you could probably harmonise and everything's caught up.
Either one.
Changes again, like we might have gone through that, so even if they change it, we don't play the day, we don't play the least understanding of what's going on. We really can tell us if it goes, and as soon as it will change again, we have base.
Yeah, the way I'm seeing it, it's either way, the consumer's going to pay for it. They're either going to pay for it in direct charges from the industry or through currently, the 22% rate increase. In the short term, we could lower that by lowering the depreciation, but that's just going to be passed on to the industry, to the consumer on the other end. So you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. In non-accounting terms, is that sort of stuff? Yeah, or pushing it, yeah.
What Julie's saying is, taking an enlightened self-interest view, you could push some of it into the end of the, yes, it's starting at the better place.
Everyone's
You're
different.
actually a strong player in this game.
What does it look like, Paul, if we went for between a 50 and a 70% depreciation?
Models that, but we can model that and then look at what that shows us, yeah. What that would then flow on to, if that's a particular case, then we'll be definitely reducing the fixture component of the 3 moors. That may have an impact on volumetric charging that we're going to talk a little bit about in a short while, as that might need to reduce because we're not requiring the same amount of money. So yeah, that we need to remodel that, but we can do that and come back.
Well, I'm not sure that that's what we want to do necessarily, but I'm looking at all these costs, when we're talking 22.73%. For our towns, we're talking 30 again.
Yeah, more than that, 35.
And I can say that my town will be very allergic to that.
Yeah, and this is your one big lever.
Yeah.
Actually been trying this opportunity by the government to get us all down in front of you.
And that's the reason we're putting it to you, because the water services industry going to have a professional board and it's established, going to have a larger balance sheet. They will be able to make other decisions that we can't make as a council.
Even the Morrison Road and the way it presented the data was almost suggesting that this was a way.
And that's all well and good. But what we're doing is we're creating for the people sitting around this table and for our community down the track.
That problem's going to manifest itself regardless.
Yeah, I agree. But it is,
Because we're still probably talking about a 100% rates rise for water alone by 2034.
What if they get it wrong? What if they get it wrong and they're out by 20%? We wear the reputational damage of something they haven't even set up and looking at a report by one outfit. And why would we be borrowing all the money other than a budget when any other business borrows it as it needs it?
Sorry, I was.
Do you want to answer that, Julie?
Can you repeat the question? I was
So I get
sorry.
the thing that keeps amazing me is any other business in the Western world borrows the money as they do the development. The other thing is, what if the entity, whoever that may be, gets it wrong? Because we're believing that the budget revenue 14 million, we're believing all the stuff being put in the concrete mixer. If they're out by 20%, we're out by a lot, and so is the whole entity. I guess our reputational value damage as a council for something that we're leaving in the hands of someone else, do they know? You just got a Morrison Lowe report telling us where we think we're going to land. It worries me that it's really going to get out of hand, and we're only dealing with, we're putting budget in figures that we're not spending yet. And that worries me greatly because we're playing Monopoly without actually knowing the cost. It just keeps worrying me that we're forcing ourselves into a budgeting nightmare 10 years out. It could be double that.
It could be. The Morrison loan numbers are just based off council's LTPs and our work that Julie and the team have done leading up to this LTP. So it's based on the best numbers that the councils were able to provide, but it's right, construction costs and all those other things down the track will play into this, but this is the best, their report's the best estimate we have at this point in time to base a decision on.
Yeah, and I go back to our wastewater, our water treatment plant at Clyde. It blew out even in months from where we knew by millions. So the worrying part about it is really the time they start up the entity, the time they start doing the things, you might have lost a year of inflationary pressure. We could be out by a mile. And it really worries me that our reputational damage, if it does, we lose a third of our business, we lose 100% of our credibility. That's what worries me.
I think you're at a risk of reputational damage either way, because water costs are going up. They're going up. People have failed to hear their constituents being told to them. It's just getting more real and the closer we get.
Julie, are there any other, with your knowledge of what's going on in Otago and Southland, are there any other councils who currently fund this at 100% to their depreciation? Or is it just us?
I don't know, but I think it's worthy of a question, to be honest. I think we would quite unusual that.
And we've said consistently around this table that we don't want to be kicking the can down the road and putting all the costs on future ratepayers, and we know those costs are coming in 2028.
Yeah.
But we also know some other things are happening within our area in the next 3 years that will generate more money. Is this something that we want to look at, is reducing that depreciation by a percentage?
Yeah, definitely.
The flow on from that, if you reduce the level of depreciation, that will reduce your level of capex unless you borrow to make up the difference, which then increases the amount that you're transferring to the new entity. So that's right. That's the for that particular thing.
I use Upper Hutt City Council as an example. All their renewals are loan funded. They do not depreciate for renewals, and all that debt is going on to the water services team.
And that's one way.
And they're not unusual in that regard.
Yeah,
there's other councils.
that ensures an intergenerational spend. But by funding depreciation now, the people who are using it now are paying for replacement in the future. Debt means the people who are using it in the future are paying for it. In a nutshell. So, which I tend to favour.
But people who are using it now should also be paying.
But people are paying for it. Who are using it now are paying for what they're using now.
Yeah, and it just depends if that continues into the future, because whereas in the past, we're all paying for what happened in the past that wasn't paid for.
Exactly, yeah.
Is there a sweet spot, do you think, Paul, recognising that in an ideal world, we would continue to fund 100% depreciation?
Yep.
But we are facing 22.73 and much, much higher for our towns. Is there a spot that we could meet in the middle somewhere? It would be still recognising that these costs are going to come on in 2028, but is this a lever that we can partially pull between now and then?
I think from purely a financial perspective, I make the point later on in the piece. I think
reducing fund depreciation and debt funding, and considering you've got it to this point that you're already funding it, I think is a backward step, because you're there, you've taken the pain over time. And it's only for a short period of time that you were doing it. The new entity then would come in and say, okay, you've been funding a certain amount of your, you've reduced the revenue, we need to make that up. So I think whatever you do, it's going to be a short-term fix for the person at the end of the day paying the bill.
Yeah. And look, and with all due respect, our CFO is an accountant, and accountants should hold that view because that's the right thing. But I'm not an accountant, and I think you do need to look at this as a lever, because that is a lever that you have right now. I agree.
That's the only one.
And I'm a councillor.
I can I, oh, hang on.
And if you, maybe cynical is too strong a word, but if you end up with a regional entity with its own balance sheet and its own books, our ratepayers are going to be getting a separate bill that has not got CODC on the address. And so the cost of free waters to the ratepayer is no longer a CODC activity. And since, never mind that the impact, the dollar impact is the same any which way. And but that is the fact of the matter. Once you've got a separate entity with a separate billing process, then
It's not us.
it's not.
Recognising that we've still got quite a lot to get through. Is there enthusiasm from around this table to see what the numbers would look like with the 50% depreciation? Yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to add. The thing that I would also be looking at as, again, CFO, take your point, Mr. But you need to look at the entire organisation as well, because there may be stuff in there 22.73 that you don't feel that you should be funding. So I guess it's not just this pick on water.
Yeah.
Let's not pick on water and then leave everything else in a nice to have. We are going to have to be hypercritical of this budget if we are going to say that half of this water cost should be kicked down the road. That will mean the nice to have stuff is coming out.
Yeah.
And I recognise that my accountant always makes me feel bad about myself as well. We still love you, Paul.
But I guess it's a holistic view, this whole thing is what I'm saying.
The only thing I'll say about depreciation is the reason why our bridges and our roads and a lot of our infrastructure is because previous councils were sitting around having these conversations trying to skim and say the only thing about the water is someone else is going to maybe misinterpret our or average out our doing well. So that's the cost of producing water. That's the cost of producing our council. If it's 22% like a lot of other businesses, when you look at the graph, it runs down on us. We're coming right towards the end. So to not appreciate any of those assets, regardless of what it is wrong. We've got to depreciate. We haven't done it in the past, and that's why we're in exactly the spot we're in now.
Division of bridges.
I think it's quite nice, and I thought about what they might look in, and they were looking at all the councillors, so Mr. they've got better understanding than anyone else done. Depreciation in our comparative case is up to 35% lower than council's existing service model projection, largely due to the use of a lower depreciation rates. So the model was not lower depreciation rates than the one we're providing. So
I think Julie made it.
So 35% less,
What
did you
they
say?
said was coming up 35% less than
Yeah.
us because they were using lower
Yeah.
and they were standardising that across the whole region.
Not,
Well, on that then,
not as good as a wing.
Yeah.
shall we give a look, please, Paul?
I'll give him a move. We'll model that.
Yeah.
Model up to 50% reduction and see what that looks like, and we'll let you know what the number comes out at. I'm assuming for the 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we will 100% take it on board that this is not a magic fix and everything else needs to be heavily scrutinised as well.
Next slide, please, Wayne.
And really, this slide is just saying that one of the suggestions was we don't pay debt. Same principle occurs, that if we don't pay debt, we're keeping the debt levels higher, and borrowing capacity is lower for the new entity because we're transferring a higher amount of debt. So although we've only got 1.25 million of repayment in the budget going forward, so it's 1.5% to 2% kind of number, but yeah. The next slide, thanks, Wayne. So these, we've talked about this, I'm not going to go through this. This is exactly the conversation you've just had. So, you know, it's how do we pull those levers that makes it palatable. So I think we can move on to everybody's favourite, volumetric charging. I'm not going to talk about the details of the principles of volumetric charging. I'm just going to talk about the results. We have modelled the results in the sample properties, and we've assumed a 30% reduction in usage from the current year. So that's the modelling that's been done. Calculates the revenue that goes forward. There are a couple that we haven't reduced by 30%, and they're in the motel and hotel space, because then they may not have the same ability to control water usage as your average residential person who can, you know, run the washing machine once a week rather than twice or 3 times or whatever, you know. So there's a couple of little changes there for the motel hotel space, because we thought that, yeah, they're not going to be out of control and reduce as much. They may do that, but when we get to the sample properties, it was an interesting outcome.
So just, there's a difference, because when I presented our model, we kind of did a rough analysis based on a 20% reduction, and then Chantel subsequently done a lot of analysis on sensitivity analysis about if this happens, what would it mean for our revenue district. So as the difference between that we picked up from the 20% changing it to 30%, there's actually quite a $100,000 risk in there that under a number of different scenarios you could be short $1,000 of revenue. So 30% actually manages that risk. Yeah.
Did you do any modelling that included loss to leakage?
No, because we don't charge for that. So this is just this year we're billing for this quantity of water. And so if we increase the volume of charge and people changing behaviour, overall there could be a 30% reduction, and that would mean we're looking at this much revenue from volumetric charging.
Leakage is separate.
Yeah, leakage is just a loss in the system, but say it's not in production, it doesn't really charge.
So I just thought I'd highlight from that perspective the changes to volumetric charging is to change people usage and put their behaviour in that. It does increase the life of the assets because less water going through the system makes the assets last longer, and reduces the cost of treatment because less water is being used. But yeah, we've got all that through. That's the high level. Why would you do volumetric charging?
A big one for us is around Cornwall and Clyde in particular. We are going to have to pull forward some projects of like at the moment, I've got them in year sort of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They're going to have to come forward a lot faster if we don't reduce demand. So I'm going to be able to get enough water through the pipes to service the growth.
And our own water consumption, you know, with the greenways and all that sort of stuff?
That's the sensitivity analysis that Chantal did. She said, like, if the very high water users reduced by 50%, but the household reduced by 20%, you know, what would that look like? So that's why she said it's about $800,000 a year of risk that we could not get it.
Next slide, Wayne, please. So it's proposed to cover the operational costs from volumetric charging. Finance costs, debt repayments and CapEx should actually come from more certain sources, to reduce the risk of not achieving the required levels of income to meet commitments. So that's why we've still got a little bit of a fixed charge sitting in there to cover those aspects. Now that may come down a little bit, obviously, if we do the 50% funded depreciation reduction. The increases that we're talking about from 60 cents to $2.40 will cover the OPEX costs. And $2.40 is the outcome of reducing usage across all users by 30%, which is what June's just talked about. Anything less than 30% will provide additional revenue. So if people drop it by 20%, then we're okay. If they drop it by more than 30%, then that's going to cause a little bit of a problem from an operational deficit creation, and we need to work out how we would fund that. But 30%, given that that we've already got water charges in place, although they are low, means that the impact is probably not going to be as significant from a usage perspective.
And the fixed charge comes back from what to what?
Sorry,
The fixed charges for water comes back from what to what?
we just worked that out.
795 or something.
Yeah. It's fast.
When water metering was first mooted, and we were one of the first, the early adapters to water metering, there was a significant amount of pushback from the community as far as what the place looked like. You do live in a desert, and it would turn to a desert. You know, it's just the fact that people stop watering their burns and that, and people on fixed incomes who may have been gardeners stop watering their gardens. There was quite a significant response. I think over the ensuing years, people realised that they could afford to water their gardens and things like that. There's going to be some serious kickback to that, so that's why it's going to be critical that when we sell it, that there is what you're paying. You're paying for what you're using. So that $7.90 figure, it's going to be quite clear that what that is.
The numbers that we're currently paying for water is $8.58, and it would go down to $5.64 under 100% funded depreciation.
Yeah.
If you reduce that, then it would go down
again.
further than that.
Yeah. I mean, those are the figures that we need as elected members to be able to sell the job. The other thing that it occurred to me that, especially with last year's rate increases, I got the impression that when you could make comparisons to household in other communities, our rates were coming off our increases were coming off a fairly low base. And I think those sort of comparisons is what we're going to start needing as elected members to actually help sell this, because we are coming off compared to a similar sized property in our neighbours.
Yeah.
What we pay in rates around here is really quite low.
Well, we can talk a little bit about that with the sub property that you've got.
Yes, yeah, exactly. That's sort
Do
of,
you mean having, we've got our sample properties here, but also putting in a sample property from Waitaki and Christchurch and Dunedin?
Bingo.
Yeah.
That's a similar.
Comparative properties.
because
Taxpayer does that every year, don't they? They put out a list of rates from top to bottom, and this council's always sort of been in that bottom third.
yeah, we have, and we know that, but Julie, I take the point that Julie made earlier. The punters don't understand, the ratepayers out there have got no understanding of where the increases are coming from. We saw the argument against free waters, and that boiled down to co-governance and our assets being taken off us, and that's where the anti-mob grew really big. Well, this is really free waters without co-governance. And the ratepayers have no comprehension of why this. We will get the blame for it, even though we're doing our darndest to provide a service of the highest quality, but this is what it costs.
And it's not what was Three Waters without co-governance. If we go into a regional CCO, for example, we would be shareholder effectively, our people will still own their assets. And I think that's an important point to make, because that was a particularly contentious one.
Yes.
An academic.
That's an academic point, right? Still peering
And-
privatisation.
And the only other point I would make is remembering too, this is only your responsibility for the next few years, because this will become the water services role to determine the volumetric charge. But this sets a good benchmark for them to.
And it's an example. We've let it slip, not increased it.
12 years. 2012, wasn't it?
What's our,
It's still sitting.
what's our next bit?
Sorry, moving on quickly, there may be some fish hooks in volumetric charging that we have to work through. Some businesses will not be able to reduce their usage due to their nature, and I'm thinking specifically of hotels and motels. We've got these sample properties that show some significant increases. In terms of the numbers that we've given you, the rates increase of 22.73 does include the increase in volumetric charging. So what it's done is it's dropped the fixed charge and increased the volumetric charge. So the total rates bill includes the new water charging regime, or the potential new water charging regime as well. And there's the flow on effect that may, and there may be other industries, and it might not be, council may not look at, may look at that and say, well, that's the nature of your industry. So I'm not suggesting one way or the other what you should be looking at. I'm just presenting the information. So we move on now, if we can, Wayne, to some properties. And we've got two options for to show you. We've modelled these properties, and the options are around the new community facilities rate, which is due to districtisation. This is where the rubber's going to hit the road in terms of who's going to pay what for the newly districtised activities and the changes in water charges. So option one, 100% fixed targeted rate for community facilities. Bear in mind that we were going to have a separate water swimming pool rate for Teria. That now, based on the potential for the council to take that on, there's no need to have a differential in there. So that is just being all put into the community facilities rate and recharged across the district. The water meter rate is being raised to $2.40, and the water usage, where appropriate, is at 70% of the previous year's usage. Now, bear in mind that these, when we model this, we draw a line in the sand. If we could model it at 20%, we could model it at 40% your water usage loss. So we just pick 30%, we've given us a 70% of previous years. Next one, Wayne, thank you. And option two is 50% fixed charge, 50% capital value charge for community facilities rate. Using capital value means it shifts to the urban area the incidence of rates, because in terms of rural spaces, most of the value sits in the land rather than the value of improvements. Water $2.40 and the water usage where appropriate 70%. So we've moved to the next one, Wayne. So we've done it like wood, and I think if you look at the sort of by wood, so this sheet here is the full detail, but the for option one, you can see that where the issue starts to occur is in the motel space. What? In the hotel space. We've got in the Cromwell Major Hotel, we suspect is an issue with the water meter.
Oh, so there is. I can tell you about that. We discovered it.
This is, yeah.
So they've got their when the amenities read this, should be getting multiplied by 10 because it's got a bigger, and that multiplication factor has been being applied. So they've been getting a much cheaper water meter rate for, since water meters were introduced then, actually they should be getting, so they've been on a winner.
But they're not now.
No,
Are they aware?
Yeah. An error in the way it was being read, what they, it's because they were getting us free ride.
Are they aware of that error now?
No, you just discovered it and they're going to be sent to me to tell them that it's been an
Yeah.
error.
This is live.
Maybe they could send that now,
Yeah,
perhaps, Chris, and perhaps make a phone call.
I mean, we've used the data we have, because to run these models is quite.
And just try to really listen to them and feel what they are trying to portray and how they're feeling and
That was good.
Right.
Possibly in another meeting.
No, perfect,
I'm
that's all right, I thought it was.
Look, I would suspect that the major hotel for Cromwell would be up in the 40% once we get the correct water usage in there, because that's, it seems that that's where this is the industry that seems to be getting hit in terms of our sample properties. So that's Cromwell using option 1, 100% fixed target community facility rate. If we move to option 2, which is on the next page, Wayne, thank you. You can see that it raises the percentage change because you're now moving it to more on capital value. Half of it's on capital value, which is, as I said in the 2 slides ago, that the by using capital value, it shifts the incidence of rates more to the urban space because their proportion of capital value to their total value is higher as opposed to the rural space. So you can see that they kind of up in the, the 14s with the motels and hotels still at that level of in the 40s. So we move on to the next one, and this is the impact of the water, just the water charges on their own on the sample properties. So you can see it's not, some of these farms, obviously these farms have no water charge, but the motels and hotels really take a jump. That's all, yeah. This is just purely water. The previous 2 had the UAC come off of it. And that's why they're at 300% and not 180%. So,
but was there residents, how did you calculate what that average, this one average property and the median property?
the sample properties have been used for, we've taken what's been in the annual plan going back in history, so it gives us consistency over time. We can then look at that particular property, and I in answer to your question, Judith, I don't know how they chose them at the time they chose them to be used for same.
That's a lot, 1,500 million, that's the huge increases in the normal residential, and we can see uses of holding. So I just think we keep about that average property, because the big huge range in that average, and depending on which property you had.
But we can easily put out there what the average user is using, because you've given those numbers before, and then people can work out from their own bill if they're an average user or above or below, and then make the amendments.
Because we had those 3 tables in your presentation. 3, high, moderate, low user.
I mean, we've used the properties that we've used to provide consistency. If we were going to change the properties, we would need to go back and use those properties for previous calculations to get the changes. So some councils pick 4 properties and they might say the 25th percentile, so they pick the property that's exactly 25% of the values, and then they might pick 50%, 75%, and so on, so that they've got, same same range that you've got, but you've got to use the same properties.
I think you do need to use the same properties and maybe just a bit of an asterisk or a disclaimer around the water use and that is not
Yeah.
average, that'll be.
I just wanted to show you last year's actual rates. So they've got the Donald Brownlee's there, but these can actually relate to the fact that they have paid $172.20 or around about that. So they're going to be impacted by that.
Yeah.
So that's lower for that. Spares in there so people can actually reflect and then probably go up and down the line.
And find what is relevant.
But then also then they can take off the savings that they're going to get from the annual user charge, because obviously you're not going to be paying $309 more. It's just they're paying more for their usage, but they're going to be saving money off their uniform annual charge.
And there's assumptions that people are going to use this.
We've modelled that we would.
Yeah, because I've done maths on Alexandra residents, which is me, and I'm a gardener. I used 190 under the previous charging scheme, and it's proposed I'm going to use 133 cubic metres, and I start paying $2.40 for it. I won't.
You might change some of your peonies for cactuses, so.
No, I'm not.
That garden's dying pretty quick, and
Yeah, the
And
garden's flying for the.
The great thing about this is that if you feel like you want to maintain the garden you have at the cost that it will be, you can do that. And if you don't, if you want to reduce it, it may be that you change the way that you water your garden or the types of plants that you put in when things need replacing. And that's,
We have a dry garden.
or you have a dry garden.
most not
Scaling,
Yeah,
like
like
going to a.
I mean, I guess that as has been said, one of the objects of volumetric charging is to change behaviour. People have that choice to change it.
I think people's use of water has changed since we brought the volumetric charging. You don't see the blatant wastage that you used to with people watering their lawns and howling your oysters at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And water running down. You just don't see it anymore like you used to.
Still have a very high average consumption rate though, at over 500.
Yeah, because we live in a very dry place.
Yep.
We're in a desert.
Just move on, because I think that's a discussion for
The community.
I'm just modelling how that looks on a property basis. So if you move on to the next one, Wayne, and I think we can quickly flick through this. The brown coloured column there is what the ratepayer at that particular sample property paid last year in terms of their increase. Note the things like the Cromwell Hotel and the Bannockburn Hotel. In 2 years, over 2 years, the proposal is that they would have a significant increase. It's in nearly 80% over 2 years.
And that's in direct response to water.
Well, that's firstly a direct response to what you did last year in terms of your 18.3. So whatever flowed from that, and there will be things like multiple pan charges, etc., that these guys will pay that others won't. The numbers that we're talking in terms of the 49% potentially and the 34%, that's a function of 22.73, which includes your water usage. So what we've modelled for those guys is that we are unsure as to whether they will be able to reduce their level of consumption by 30%. So we've just said they're a hotel, they're a motel, people will come in and use the facilities, and tourists will, maybe they leave the tap on, run a bar, whatever. I don't know what usage patterns are, but we have said that we don't think that will reduce, but that's only a small group within the overall picture. So we may get others who reduce by more than 30% that offset that. So overall, we're still comfortable with 30%, but we think that from a rating perspective, we're not sure that some parts of the business, some parts of the consumer base we'll be able to achieve that, and that's just what we want to be, so. If we move on to the next one, Wayne, which is Manitoto, and it's a similar outlook. You've got quite low increases in the large farm area because the community facility is a fixed rate, so they pay less proportionally. The water operations rates are charged through $2.40, and you can see again the hotel for Ranfurly and the motel. The Manitoto Rural Hotel is kind of up in the 20s, and that Patio residence, I'm not sure why that's at 33, but that's the number it came out at. So, yeah, on average, if you run fixed charges, your rural space pays less than your urban space does. Moving on to the next one, option 2, you can see it shifts around a little bit, and you'll be able to look at these on the sheet that we've provided. Yeah, it's as expected. The farms start picking up more because there's a little bit on capital value, but they don't pick up as much as they would. The residents of Patio drops about 5%. Next one, Wayne. So this is the water charges. I'd say that yeah, with the residents in Patio there is getting a $900 increase if they continue at 70% of their water usage, and they've had a $300 reduction roughly in their fixed charge. So they're still paying more.
So one of the reasons why Penny Roll might come in at point is that some of those rooms, so they get over 1,000 cubic meters. They get paid for a cubic meter per day. So they might use less, whereas when we put meters in, meters and other company, they might get a reduction. So we just do need to be careful with that person. So because they might not be reflective of actually the most properties.
No, but they're just
Because 519 metres actually quite if it hits 60 cents a cube. You know, if the average use is 325 cubic metres a year, 519 is actually quite a lot higher than that average property. And it's significantly higher than the median at about 230. But it's in the right position here.
The summary on the next page, Wayne. So again, I've listed the annual plan increases. Then you can see getting into the hotel and motel space. It's a significant change, especially where, and you can see the water impact from the second to bottom and the bottom one, where one has a water charge and the other one doesn't. You know, we're talking 38% versus a 5% increase last year, in 21 versus 14 this year. Moving on to Teviot. Again, I think this will include the increase that of the pool coming over to council potentially. Districtisation work that's done, there's another $200 per ratepayer in the Teviot coming across. And that's why those numbers are significantly higher, because that was a lot lower than it was, and they're now picking up the districtised rate, which includes their own swimming pool costs. And we put $250,000 in, I think, for that. So moving on to the next page, this is option 2. So you can sort of see the difference as you move through the capital value versus the fixed charge for Teviot's a It's does have the impact of the swimming pool issue, the districtisation that, when we originally went out, wasn't going to be, that like that. So, moving on to the Tennant Valley water charges. You can see, the increases there. And what you expect where they have a connection. The Roxburgh residents, $210 increase, but they've had a $294 decrease in their rate, so they're on the winning side. Moving on to sample product summary, and you can see there, I'll probably just skip these because they're on that big sheet. You can look at those, and if you've got any questions around what you've seen there, you can answer those. And the sample, the summary gives you what we charged last year plus what we're proposing by the various options this year. Vincent, moving on to the next one. This one gets a little bit messy because there are a lot more properties that we've chosen in Vincent. But if you look down at the option one, go to the Cow Hotel, it's looking at a 69% increase under option one. So there are some outliers there that the volumetric charging does impact.
And that's again on that assumption that they will not be able to reduce their water use, and they may well be if they're putting restrictions on water.
To be fair, they can use water anymore. Other than maybe feeding the pot. Shouldn't be any water going through the freezer because there's been no one in the building.
Yeah, and so the hotel does have quite a bit garden, and so, you know, that's a lot of people.
There's a lot of housing.
I guess the question really is, given the type of activity that people are in, the costs are falling where, do you want the cost to fall where they lie? In which case this number that comes out here is perfectly acceptable.
That's right.
Or do you think that that is not quite right and you want to do an adjustment in some way?
I think that was the whole point of this, was that the cost falls really high. Yeah.
So, and that all we're really showing here is these are the outcomes. You look at the Alexandra Hotel, which I hope's got people going through it. You know, that's something probably that's a 64% increase this year. And that will, you know, if they've got a 64% increase in the rates, now 7,200 increase for option one. What does that mean to them in terms of their pricing? Well, that's something that they would probably need to work out themselves. So, yeah, I'm not. I don't think that that's too far away from. And if we move to the next page, which is Vincent option option two, similar picture. Again, high water users getting charged for it. Moving on to the next one, which is water charges. You can see the movements there. That is, we're kind of expecting in terms of dollar amount. So if you subtract the previous table from this, you get the other rates increases. And then Vincent's summary. Now, I guess the important thing is that you need to have a wee bit of a look at, if you take the Alexandra Hotel for argument's sake, the some of their changes for option one and two are 64%. They got 36% last year. So that's effectively 100% in 2 years. So those are the types of things, given this information, that you need to think about, and whether, as I say, whether that's possible where they lie, or do you want to do something for a particular group. So that's what this table hopefully provides you the information that you can think about that. Next one, Wayne, which is, do you have any questions?
I'm sorry. If you've got questions, make them short.
So can you just so I'm clear in my head with the option two, you're basing it on obviously the current capital value.
Yep.
which could change.
The capital value will change. We're due for a revaluation next year.
2 years? It's only just been done, isn't it?
Next year.
So we'll get our LTP across the line under these values, and the QB will come in and start the revaluation process.
Because that potentially could have quite a big impact on the rural sector. You'll see the rural sector go.
Yep. It will, and it will impact the first annual plan that we do. So we'll have year one of the long-term plan, which will go through the valuation year that happens. They'll get all the numbers in place then year two, when we do our annual plan again, that will be impacted by the valuation numbers.
Okay, so when you say in option two that there's 50 CV and fixed targeted.
Yes.
So that fixed targeted rate has not been applied for the rural properties in this.
Yes, it will be. Yeah.
Whereas option one doesn't come in. So that fixed targeted rate won't be in that option one, will it?
So effectively what will happen is that we will need to, what's the targeted rate? Have we got that number there? 100%. So effectively what it's saying is that we need to collect 5 million for argument's sake, right? We are going to take 5 million and divide it by the number of rating units within the district. So everybody who is a rating unit will pay their share of the 5 million at a fixed rate. So say it's $500. So rural will pay $500 per rating unit. Urbans will pay $500 per rating unit. What we've then done, well, the 50-50 is said, well, we still collect 5 million, but what we're saying is we want to collect half of it from the fixed, on a fixed charge. So per rating unit will pay $250 for argument's sake. And the balance, the other 2.5 million will be collected from a capital value rate, which might mean that farms, rurals will pay $700 because their capital value is higher, and urbans, because it'll all be based on capital value. So, potentially nobody should pay the same amount of capital value is. So rurals will pay more because they've got a high capital value. Urbans will pay less, but if you base it on land value, rurals will pay proportionally more because most of their value sits in the land value. And urbans would pay proportionally less because there's less amount sitting in their total value that sits in their land. That makes sense.
Yeah, I totally get that, but you can see where, from the rural perspective, they're going to come along and say, well, we're paying, under option two, we're paying a much higher percentage for urban water.
Yeah.
Not the volumetric charges, I understand.
And I guess that's where you would look at it as their contribution to, the shops and the libraries and the pools and all of that they make use of.
Yeah.
It's not going to be an easy sell for anyone.
It's not going to be an easy sell.
Pretty much every year, in my experience, federated farmers, because fixed charges benefits large rural units, because on a proportional basis they pay less than the capital value charge does, and that's what will happen. The issue we have in that respect is that if we are charging uniformly across the district, we have 30% cap on fixed charges, so we can't go beyond that. We're quite low at the moment, but with some of the stuff that we're fully fixed, and that pushes that up. But again, that's a conversation that you've got to, given that you've got your sample properties there now, that's a conversation that you can have in terms of what's the impact on the urban area versus the rural area. And we've said 50-50, but you can make it any portion that you like. You might make it 20-80, whatever. We can model that and see what the answer looks like. But it's not, 50-50, just, so again, we just picked that because we needed to pick something.
So when would you need to know if we wanted that model? Sooner rather than later, I guess.
No, that's, I think that's revenue and financing policy stuff. So that's quickly, we need it in the next probably month-ish.
Okay.
if you guys wanted to have another discussion, we could put a paper up, in January, I guess we could do that.
We can do that.
And you could make your decision based on, well, in January, we would produce the revenue and financing policy. Because effectively we're dealing with a new rate, being the community facility rate. We have to publicly consult on that. And that's where we would set how we want to charge it.
So that would go into the LTP, then, Toby?
No, separate document.
Separate?
Yeah, separate document.
Do you want some time to go away and have a look through these numbers and then have something come back for us to make a decision between option one and option two?
I'm happy for, yeah, I know you were asking the council, not me, but the sooner we can get a lead on it, the quicker we can get the information and see what it looks like.
Probably the 18th, eh? Along with that other paper of one of the outcomes that would need from the council meeting.
The on the next Wednesday, it would be good if councillors have worked through this.
Okay,
And you can give us some direction on the 18th and inform time to say, hey, can full model X, Y, and Z, and then we can take it away in January. Form on and all that. Bring that back January 29th, May, take for a decision.
I think that would be good because I think there's going to be some contention about that and we probably need to make a decision as opposed to give a steer in the workshop. So if that could come back for next week, that would be awesome. Thank you. Any other super positive news you wanted to highlight?
I always see you the super bad. Just the CFO. You know.
But you bring it with a smile, so you know. Almost. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Recognising that we are a bit of overtime, does anybody want a quick 2-minute break to refill your coffee cup and or use the bathroom? No, cool. Right, cracking on. Performance measures.
Okay.
Thanks, Donna.
I'm going to run the session. We're going to have We've done an amazing job branding the organisation. So Deb's put in the process. So Deb will talk about sort of how we got about it, and then each of the GM will talk to the particular area, and we will explain if we've made changes and why. So I'll hand over to Deb, and then we'll circulate through us all.
Got the slideshow running. Yeah, so the reason we do these is, you slip to the next one, please. The reason we do these is both to let our community know what we're doing and how we're achieving, and based on the performance measures that we've set for ourselves. And of course, we also need to report those to client. Those performance measures, and as we look through them, we want to make sure that they directly relate to something that we do, not something that's outside of what we do. And so that's one of the factors that we looked at when we reviewed these intake KPIs. Are they realistic and achievable? So we don't want to lower our standards so that we just meet them every time. That's artificial, and that's certainly not the goal of the process. At the same time, we want to take into consideration what the costs are if we want to achieve 90%, 100%, and that's going to speak to that next bullet point there. If we want to achieve success at 90%, 100%, or a really high level, it is possible to do that, but there's costs associated with doing that. And so that's the balancing act that the activity managers are considering. Is it possible to evaluate? So if we have a standard, but it's really complicated or time consuming or staff heavy, then that's something we're trying to steer away from. So that's another factor that we looked at. And then what is the method of evaluation? A lot of things are in the resident survey, but there's a lot of things that aren't in the resident survey. So it's not the only method that we use for evaluation. Next slide, Wayne. So when we looked at the changes, we considered me sort of leading the process, but really the activity managers. But we need to be able to explain why we're making changes. Are we increasing those standards or are we reducing those standards? In particular, if we're reducing those, what's the justification for that? Because we know the community's gonna wanna know, and we know that you guys will be interested in why those changes are being made. So in some cases, there's an increase in the number of KPIs, particularly in water. And most of those are based on legislative requirements that are beyond our control. And so we weren't really looking to increase the number of KPIs. We're actually looking to do the opposite. But because of some legislative mandates, we don't always have a choice. So whether we reduce them or increase them, it's about accurately showing how we perform in these different areas. Okay. So we've changed the community outcomes. Those were adopted by council on the 27th of November. So the wording that you saw in the document, you would have seen a bit of red over on the left-hand side. That has to do with those changes on community outcomes. So what once was sustainable environment now says respect for the environment and so on. Expressions of culture wasn't something that originally was a community outcome, and now it is. And so those changes were made after I met with all the activity managers. So I had to take some liberties on deciding which of these community outcomes were associated with each of their KPIs. And so they may want to make some changes to those because that was really just sort of my speculation. Next slide, Wayne. But that speculation was based on something real. So it's really hard to see the white writing at the bottom where it says alignment outcomes. But that was the guidance that I used in sort of attaching which outcomes associated with each KPIs. And in that white, that's really hard to see. There is guidance about how each of those outcomes align with our KPIs. So this is where we get into the nitty gritty, where the managers need to address the changes that they've made, but those weren't choices that I made. I was just sort of running the process. So community, economic, and strategic development is the first one. And these were sent to you guys in advance because I fully recognize that the Excel spreadsheet was difficult to read.
I expect it. So under the so the red ones are the changes. So I'll go over set up read. So in the left-hand column, this will be the same for all the future ones you'll see, is these have been adjusted to meet what are the new community outcomes that the council has agreed to. So that's why they have changed. If we actually look at the measures, the first one to change is community development. And council empowers local communities and facilities to deliver very best profit. So that's
For delivery of community outcomes by providing community grants.
Thank you. And then this refers to percentage of budget community grants awarded through the community organisations. So our aim is that 80% is going to now 2% comparison. That makes sense. So this is giving it a hard metric and referring to the grants, which we haven't done before.
Will that account for the likes of you've given a grant, but then something happens and they have to give it back? Is that why it's 80% and then 100?
Correct. We fail. Right. And we don't always, not every year, grants always go out. Sometimes they're not applied for.
Yeah.
Next one, council supports and empowers local communities through the community development activity. Level of satisfaction with community development, focus on community planning, grants administration, community outreach and community advocacy. That is picked up through the resident opinion survey. So we measure that. That's what the residents tell us. The question of the resident opinion survey. At odds, I suppose, with that is we're actually taking two questions. Well, sorry, the two questions will still remain in the residents' opinion survey about both economic development and tourism, and we're going to still seek the residents' opinion about what those two things are, but they're not going to be performance measures that we will include in the audit report. The audit report will be about economic development, attending a minimum of 10 community meetings or business group meetings per annum. So there's a firm metric that we measured. And the one for tourism is running 2 workshops held with the tourism and business community per annum. So they're firm metrics. So it doesn't mean that we won't be asking the community, because we still want to ask the community, but they won't be included in the policy. Is any questions? And the last one is just a wording change for the policy.
Yeah, I've got one, Dylan.
Yeah.
Is Lights of the Business meeting in Ranfurly a part of a group, community group throughout the year?
Yeah, correct. So
And my question to that is, a majority of those people aren't businesses.
Majority are or aren't, sorry?
Aren't. Like, other than the shop and maybe occasionally the mechanic, as a percentage of the businesses represented in the mini toto, it's a very, very, very small group.
Yeah.
Some will be council facilities or community groups rather than business. So in its economic development, I mean, I would challenge that there's no, other than Tanya Murray, who herself is a business or a shop, there's hardly any other retailers there, and other than no agriculture unless it's myself. And really, so, you know, it's not a fair reflection. While it's a very good motivated group, and they're wanting growth, like, for example, it doesn't represent the dairy industry or the irrigation companies or the transport, who are massive parts of, you know, I'm going back to, I guess, 86% of the GDP comes from agriculture, but unless I'm there, agriculture is not represented, I guess I'm saying.
Yeah, look, and you're not wrong, and I think Sally would probably argue exactly the same for the Tevere Valley. You'd probably argue the same in Cromwell. They're not fully representative of their different community industries or sectors. I guess they are our best touch points, but we would love to see them grow. And if we've got an ability to make it happen, we will do that, or bring in other groups that are more relevant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always one of those economic community development things is sometimes I guess I get sick of hearing, I saw it somewhere the other day, you know, New Zealand's so based on forestry and farming that we need to develop new businesses. And in the real risk in the modern day environment, the real new business that has its savings account and comes to small rural towns, whether it be, you know, even be Wanaka or Queenstown, fail in the first so many months of their life that they actually get a whole lot of hearsay and economic development strategy, but they're not sustainable. And the real risk is you've got to be economically viable to actually to be a part of that strategy. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, cool. No, that's true. Thank you. Anyone else? No, I'll be open the board.
Thanks, Dylan.
I think moving on this up, very little change here, councillors, so as these features just updated that we've been following the outcomes. And what you'll see in the second one, this is all around an employment and official requested event. We have just added that we have processes in place to enable participation and provide access to official information, and our measure there remains the same, that basically we provide that information and we don't complaints ourselves around how we manage our employment and privacy requests. So that is going to change there. The only thing I wanted to raise with you all was the top one there, which is a direct, one of the main measures around elected members. So what it currently says is percentage of customers, survey respondents satisfied that elected members are making a positive difference. When I worked it through with Deb, I didn't think it required change, but that is one that is a measure of this table here. So if there's any feedback, conversation around that particular one.
Lower our expectations. Sarah would like to lower
that one there, though, would be a classic example of what we went through the other day. The community's not satisfied when the council maybe put in the solar farm would be a classic example. That if people aren't happy, they think at the moment, the other night, people saying the council aren't telling the community what's going on. It's nothing to do with what the council, they're sitting with a legislative requirement, but the people in the public seem to think we're not doing our job.
Yeah, but that's always the case.
Eh?
I think it's something that the community needs the ability to have their say on, and we kind of, one for the team, take one for the team. Recognise that the decisions that we make are reflected in that, and that it's not necessarily a positive difference when we're talking about rates increases.
But if you take that result in 2023, 24, and obviously it's representation by elected members, so that's us, it's not staff, where does that give me feedback to us? Because our aim is 75%. Well, if you go back to the Minnesota one, we're receiving 80% for a while. Why is it now 40? And what have we done differently that's made that come up in a target? And we're the same people in 2023 surveyed in 2024, 324.
And I think you say we, Stu, when there's only you.
So the people are fickle, Stu, the people are fickle.
Wait, do you want, is making a positive difference, what we want to say, or do we want to say that they're satisfied that elected members are making competent decisions as opposed to positive decisions? And that way then gives people the ability to say that they are happy with the decision making, but not necessarily that it's positive.
This is one of my opinions. Positive differences in the other power.
Yeah.
Making that difference?
And it's what I think is a positive difference may not be what you think is a positive difference.
Yeah.
And so it's quite, it's not the measure, it's like the measure. Yeah.
I mean, that satisfied elected members are making informed decisions on behalf of the community. Yes, you're right. Some of the decisions you make are popular. Responsible decisions. Something that implies like
Making responsible decisions, recognising that they are not always positive or popular. Do we want to?
Want us to have a little go?
Yeah.
But
are we just wordsmithing to try and change that metric?
But we're also asking questions.
I mean, the bottom line is they're only unhappy because we had to put the rates. So if you didn't put the rates up, that number would be very different. That's all I understand.
But then we would be representing.
Was right in one of the press.
Yeah. And are we wanting to be measured on making a positive difference or making a responsible decision or a competent decision or a doing the right thing, effective contribution or doing their job? Yeah, doing their job. Do you want to we look at it?
Yeah. You want us to go away with that?
Yeah. The foreman is expected for it, right? Yes, it's really good.
That's me, next up, Peter Knight.
It is.
Right, see that.
Wow.
A bit blank on see that, so I've got the paper on see that as well. And I probably can't see that stand right in front of me.
No.
So we'll try and decipher this for you. So the left-hand side is as per what Dylan had already outlined in relation to the alignment with the community outcome. And really, I guess, we haven't looked to change very much in relation to these because there's no easy way of changing it. I guess the one thing to bring to your attention is this one here, and you might not be able to bring too well as regards to building, is because the reason that I'm looking to potentially delete that one is that's to do with the accreditation. If we're not accredited, I'm not going to be standing. And so the only council that has lost its accreditation is Christchurch. So it's kind of more like we're keeping you updated and auditing risk as well with the accreditation side of things. Is there a need for that to be a performance measure? Because that in itself is really the question on the side. So that's the one that I'm going to delete.
Well, you can't do your job if you're not accredited, so.
Well, I won't be doing it because they'll be bringing externals in to involve 100% over that. The other from we've had conversations between the teams is whether or not there's the ability to kind of standardise the performance percentages, which is within these columns. And so you'll see in some of them we've got like 95%. In other parts of the organisation we might have 60%. And with a conversation with Deb, we felt like we couldn't really standardise that because of the different services that we're providing. And certainly in Janice's side of things as well, I think that's more around that sort of, it might be 90% that we're looking at. And so there's a question of whether or not, raise myself is to say, should they be 100%? If we say we're aiming for 100%, because to do our statutory timeframes, it should be 100%. The reason I haven't changed it is because for building, for argument's sake, if we're around about like 96, 97%, to get that next 3%, there's going to be significant more investment by more staff again. And I know that, you know, through the recent conversations we've had, we've already given authority in relation to 3 roles. We may get up there a wee bit more in relation to that. So that's the question mark for, and then certainly as we go on to Janice's side of things, there'll be a question of, we've got a target there for 90%, we're averaging around about 70%. Do you want to reduce that target? Or do we want to, you know, invest substantially to get to that 90%, which is going to be more costly? Any questions? Oh. Next slide, then I guess.
The interesting thing though, isn't it, is in the annual report, not only this measure, but we kept this measure into the annual report, but the statutory timelines will be in the annual report.
Yes.
So this is at the same alignment to the community outcomes done. So there's 4 measures there, and that's around waste and in compliance with landfills and carbon footprint. So the notes in this is around the total waste of landfill per rateable property is incremental year-on-year reduction. So proposing to leave that the same, but just noting that we've introduced our 4-bin system. We have, well, I think there's very, very good waste services and ability for people to divert. We've increased our transfer station offerings and everything like that about how people can dispose their waste. It will get harder to keep going with an incremental year-on-year reduction, but at this stage we're still continuing to meet that. Customer satisfaction with waste services is incremental increase. We've gone from 73 to 81%, but incremental increase, at what point do you start failing in that? Do we look at setting an actual fixed percentage of that greater than 70%, 75%, 80% satisfaction? So that's a suggestion for that one. And the carbon footprint reduction. So we're currently measuring our organisational footprint year on year. Incremental reduction or set annual reduction targets in there. One point about that is we are going to see probably increase that footprint with a lot of new treatments and different bits coming online in that space. And the other challenge we have is actually measuring that in the time frame to meet the annual reporting cycle. So end of July, August, we have to have those numbers through to finance to go into the annual report. We don't then get audited on that number and checked until much later in the year. Our audit's actually January this year. So we've actually given a number to audit from what we've worked through, but that's not, sorry, Audit New Zealand is part of our annual report audit. And our actual audit with Toitu comes much later, and then that can actually adjust that. So that's proposed to potentially removing that measure, but bringing a report that council with that report once it is actually audited and we know that result, and continuing to measure it that way. And then the other is just compliance with resource consent conditions. So that's our transfer station closed landfills, and that's incremental percentage improvements again. So if we get to 100%, we'll have a failed measure the next year when we have 100%. So as proposed at around 90% compliance for that. Next one, please. So the majority of roading performance measures are DIA measures. The only exception in there is the customer satisfaction survey. So it was proposed to potentially remove, because we asked quite a number of questions around satisfaction with unsealed roads, satisfaction with sealed roads, footpaths, and didn't put that through the survey. The only one actually coming in is satisfaction with the condition of unsealed roads. So we use that data in the comments to put in additional service requests, or just actually use that as part of seeing where there's potential hotspots or issues in the area. Is there value in having that as KPI in the annual report? I guess that's the question to come back if you would like to retain that, but ultimately there are a number of questions asked about the roading space as a whole. The only other change is the percentage of footpaths that fall within the council's level of service standard for the condition of footpaths. Now, that's measured using technology. and inspections and different things like that, we are going to see, we know with the level of investment we have for footpaths, we're going to see a reduction in that. If we leave that at 70% over this long-term time period, we will fail to meet that measure. That is recognising the decision of the footpath investment, and we are going to see a reduction in that. So that's just highlighting that as footpath funding. But yeah, it's still if I was to remove that customer service one, customer satisfaction survey one in there as well. But that's from source.
Comments?
So following up, property and community facilities. When we set our benchmarks, they were more aspirational than, as Lee said before, we would have liked an opportunity to set an organisation benchmark. But the different components too are quite different. So we've got for our, I'll start with the EPH, so you can. So the CPH target, that's an internal survey that we send out to each of the tenants. It's not picked up on the residential, on the survey that goes out to the general population. The one for the airports is pretty standard. Those are targets that we have to reach. The building environment fitness, again, that's just, we need to meet those to get our own fitness and state of our buildings operational. Our public toilets is an interesting one. Some of the feedback for public toilets is that on there more attention, but they're expecting more public toilets at all the parks. And as you will be aware, public toilets are really expensive. So again, we want to lift that. It's more investment into public toilets at every single park. The top one there. Our satisfaction with the community buildings, and we haven't achieved that. A lot of that dissatisfaction came around all the discussions on what was happening in Cromwell with the new Cromwell rebuild and the trying to get to where we are now. And I would be picking with our regular service review that we might be taking a bit of a hit as well. So happy to leave those as they are, the 90%, or if there is a possibility to bring those down, because we're quite comfortable either way.
So I guess that we just add to what Dan's is saying is that if you look at the results of what we've had, we're sustained in around about 70%. Our aspirational aim is above 90%. So that's where, when I was talking earlier about that level of investment, of whether or not there's an appetite to reduce it to 70% of what we are generally achieving, or if you want to retain that aspirational 90%, but if so, unless there is more investment in that, we're highly unlikely to achieve it.
Do you think that's going to move though, once we've opened the Cromwell Town Hall, and the Oamco Hub's opened, and the Ranfurly Town Hall's been like strengthened, and all can, do you think that aspirational target is achievable in the foreseeable future with the projects that we have lined up?
Potentially, if you retain that, you're also likely to see Jonathan and Sol coming here. We're not seeing any traction in them, so we're going to need more investment. And so that's a conversation that we can have. And obviously the one below that is one obviously, but it's in relation to policy, so it's probably not relevant to how those things measured. So looking to move on.
Thank you.
Well, parks and cemeteries. We're excited. Right, I'm going to stay here, just mix it up a little bit, and I'll just talk you through. I've got my computer in front as well. So the left-hand side, as Dave introduced, just aligning with, I guess, the council objectives that they're the changes that are there. The top two are very sort of specific around parks and reserves. So the top one is we're not sort of proposing any changes, is around parks and reserves are maintained and operated so they look good and meet the needs of our users. And then the two to the right hand side, how we measure success is the customer survey the respondents are satisfied with the reserves. And the one below is the percentage of customers surveyed who respondents are satisfied with cemeteries, burial, booking system and interments. You'll notice the one, you probably can't see there, but the burials, we've sort of been hitting around that 85-ish %, and we've got a goal of 90. We are just currently going through a change of how we do the bookings online. We have had feedback from the community that's a little bit cumbersome. So I'm proposing we leave it at 90%. It's sitting at 85, and I think maybe with the change of that system this year, we might see that lift. It's a very small investment, just a slight change in process to get sort of the user experience a little bit better. One below that, we've I've proposed to you that we delete the one around playgrounds in the district and equipment that's fun and educational. It's a very subjective one, and one of the things that we talked about through the workshops is next year we'll be looking at bringing a play strategy to life. We've got nothing to align that sort of KPI with when it comes to what we're doing. The play and educational piece is quite subjective. However, once we bring a play strategy as council with our community, I think we'd be able to introduce something there. It is a target that we're meeting, and so that's great for my performance review with my boss. And so the option is there. It's sitting at sort of 85, 87%, but it doesn't sort of really tell us anything specific. So
how do you know if someone from the public has found their playground experience educational?
Yeah, we don't sort of have a metric, you know, like did they learn the alphabet there? Where we don't have the alphabet at all playgrounds. You know, so, yeah. So that's sort of, I've just proposed that we remove that and to re-look at that once we have a strategy. And then just the next one below that, just change of wording is that we do have a playground safety standards audit report that we do every year. And the wording there was to pass. It's an audit, so you don't pass or fail, we complete it. So just having it in there that we do complete one every year. And then in pools, just similar to what Deb introduced around, you know, I guess the Formula One car when it comes to investment, when you start to look at getting a tenth of a second, it becomes more and more expensive for your return on investment. So our pools are sitting around about that sort of 75, the year before they were 77, and we're hitting 80% right now in customer satisfaction. I think our level of investment, our level of staff and everything that we've got, we have had an aspiration of 90. I proposed here that we hold that at 80. That's sort of where we're sitting, and I think we have quite a good balance of user feedback, people being satisfied with our facilities. If we wanted to increase that up to 90, we'd have to really look at our user experience and increase our level of investment. So I think for us in this current LTP, I'm proposing we just try and hold that for the next little while at 80. The next one down is a new one. We've introduced a new system called Levi, where people check into the pool and we do our memberships and things through. It also has a function where we can run a survey to people who are members and things like that. So it just gives us more points in time survey responses. So I've got a proposal in there that we introduce that and we have a satisfaction rate of 80% and above, like one above. So we would do one annually and then one once in time that we would introduce when this LTP came to life. Again, we do a pool safe audit, and that's not something that we pass. This council, remember when we started doing pool safe about 10 years ago, we sort of had 30 non-compliances. It still means you can open. Now we have 0 non-compliances, and it's again an audit where they go through and say, hey, this is where you should be, this is where you are, this is your aspiration. And so just proposing we change the wording there to instead of pass to complete annually. Any sort of questions on that one, on pools, parks, cemeteries, or anything you want me to change or increase when it gets harder on? You're quite, yeah, so that will come in, sorry, from the next, so from July 1, 2025, yeah. Sorry, yeah, that's a bit okay, if we go on to service centres and libraries, these ones sort of sit consistently high for council. So we haven't sort of proposed too many changes, just kind of wording changes to align with the goals of, our objectives of council. just the two that are here, we have, the customer survey, the service was fast and efficient. We sort of hover, we've been sort of low 60s, we were 67. Last year, we were 76. The goal is 80. We have introduced a whole lot of new things, but I guess as we've grown as a council, I haven't increased our level of staffing. We're leveraging the new technology that we've put in. So I have proposed just to hold that where that sits now. I don't know if you guys remember the workshop that we had a couple of months ago where we have about 30–40% of contact from councillors solved in the first floor front desk. That level of service seems to be at a fairly good level, that not too much comes your way. We're sort of trying to increase the balance of what goes to turning what's solved at the front desk. And so for this one, I'm just proposing that we sort of hold it at 75. I think if we wanted to increase it to, well, if we held it at 80, we'd probably have to start looking at having more people on, especially in our single now sites where we have less workers, down in small and remote areas. So yeah, that one for 75, and then the one below was the service was fast and efficient. That's been sitting there again aspirationally at 90%. We're sort of consistently around that low 80s the last couple of years. So I proposed that it sits at 80%. I mean, you could take that up to 85% if you wanted us to work. If you want us to push in a bit harder, but 80% would, experimenting in the past.
So realistic as opposed to aspirational.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're sort of sitting around that sort of 83, 84, and I put it at 80. So you could say you'd rather it be at 84, but it'll be better next year than this year. That's quite in the private world. The board will just tell you have to achieve this. You've got to make sure it's off you go. It's quite nice having a conversation with you all about this. And then same with services were dealt, issues were dealt with effectively. They're sort of 75, 73. So I propose that we just drop that 5% to 75 and hold that level of service that we're currently divided. Any questions? Anything you want to work me harder on?
Certainly got that.
Right. Oh, Julie. Yeah. Oh, good.
So stormwater is actually always good for Three Waters because we always achieve all of our objectives and accounts bring it as an achievement. What we've done across the Three Waters measures is we've actually looked at set by the Department of Internal Affairs. They tell us what we have to measure, but we do get our own choice and on that set target. So every council has a different target. They can measure the same things, but they have different targets. So we have gone through what all the other Otago and Southern councils have as their targets and looked at trying to align ourselves a bit better. So we have increased a couple of our measures, the targets on them. So a number of flooding events. Previously we had nil, and you've got to think in environmental climate change, we might get more. So if we have 3, we're still at the low end of their target. Southern ones, Buddha has 23 as their target. So, it's really aiming high. And then that time to get to site and a flood event, we've increased it out to 2, which puts us more consistent with everybody else. It was 1 before, just because it was a bit flood it can go. Five from 2, which is still at the low end of the Otago Southern councils. So then the next will go from there, wastewater. So wastewater, we once again we reviewed our performance. So what we've done is we've reviewed our targets against what we actually have been achieving over the last 5 years, and also against other councils. So we're suggesting we increase the number of complaints from 10 to 14 per 1,000 connections. And look, growth is gonna result in potentially more issues happening across the network. So we think if we have that change that to retain compared to the rest of the region, that's actually reasonable and achievable for us. In terms of abatement notices, we used to just have 0 on abatement notices, infringement notices, enforcement notices and convictions. But we actually think we should set that at 3. Now that aligns with where we currently at. And the other thing is, historically, the ORC never used to do enforcement, so nobody ever got these things. It's now very common to have abatement notices because it's that first notification that you're on notice that there's something's not quite right in the process and necessarily a big significant issue. So we're suggesting we have 3. And once again, increasing the number of driveways as sewage overflows from 1,000 dimensions to 4. And that is, again, brings us, it's more achievable, and that brings us in line. Just look at the other section here. You know, 3 to 6 is common, 5, 6, 4 is common, was the region. Now, I really start apologies, I know this is really my discovery. So, I'll tell you what issue here is that there's been a change to what the Department of Internal Affairs and non-financial reporting measures require. And so they used to require us to report on our bacterial compliance and our protozoal compliance across each of our schemes. So we've got 8 schemes. 2 measures for 16 measures. They've now increased the number of measures per scheme to 10. So 8 schemes times 10 means we now have 80 measures per year. So hence, it's a bit messy, the raw ones. So the ones that we've pressed, the other thing we've done is we've looked at our contracts. So our contracts are 10 at the moment. We have there's 2 measures for both water and for wastewater that we have to report on. We have to have a target for the time to get to site when there's a call about an issue and the time to resolve the issue. And we have to do that for non-urgent requests and for urgent requests. And so we've had a look at that because we had pretty high aims on achievement of this, which inevitably costs us a lot of money because what happens is our contractors are running around the network responding to reactive calls instead of actually working in a planned, proactive way. And it takes, they just got to drop everything and go up and bundles and stuff. So we've looked at what the others do and we're proposing that for urgent call outs, our target time to get to site is still an hour. And we did have quite a debate with the contractor around it because we've set that in an hour, regardless of whether it is in the network, because they thought that should actually be longer and then in total. And we've said we don't have different lengths of service across this district because we need it. Don't have to have the whole crew there with all the gear, just have to have someone on site making the assessment that the risk is the next of service. And then we've increased the resolution to I can't even read it on the screen.
All right, well, we can't read it either. So.
Yeah, so the resolution time for an urgent call in is 6 hours. So that was comparable to the other councils. I think we previously had that. It's just more of us achievable because we needed to be doing achieving that. So there's not actually that many urgent people. That's because they're doing fine. It has to be a loss of people.
That was what my next question was going to be, was who defines what's urgent and what's not.
There's a definition of what it is. And we actually came from previous it might have been misrepresented what's urgent. Too many things might have been classed as urgent in that dimension. So for non-urgent call-outs, so that is a minor leak. In our contracts, we'll actually define what these things actually are, so that's clear. We think that someone to get slow within the next day for something that's not legion, that's perfectly adequate. And we think that we should be programming work in areas across the week. So we've seen in five working days, and it's comparable to the other councils as well. It'll cost us less money in the long run. And the reason dollars. See what it's just most of the things. And then the other one that we shifted is the one for total number of customer complaints. So we increased that to 20, which is comparable to all the other councils. Which they have. But we checked, we had 13 before. So, you know, you're looking at, Waitaki's got less than 25. Southland's actually 10, Timaru's 26. And for Perth ranges 17 to 30. We thought,
Oh, any other questions? Yeah. No. Wasn't it?
So yeah,
But these are just duplications.
Yeah, so there's 10. Yeah, we've just broken out to the drinking water quality issues first. Yeah. It's a bit painful, but it's legal. Yeah.
So the Julies, so it's just any questions, those at the moment. Fees and charges are next moving to it.
Yeah.
Julie's first up, so there's quite a few slides here, and so we're still putting this slide deck together last night, apologies. So we will circulate this to council, so what ALT will do, we'll go over some of the big stuff, and please give it to you all so you can reflect on it. So Julie's, oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Sorry.
It's all right. I'll just close it up. Fine. This is just the next steps of the performance measurement process. The final edits will be in January, and then these will go into the plan.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
So in Three Waters, we correct these charges of this, that will be renting up. We did a lot of work last year on the fees and charges, and we changed it a lot last year. So we're not really proposing to change a great deal this year, they've really just had inflation. Like to do.
So that,
Just pause a moment, Julie, please.
because perhaps we should go, because we've got development contributions booked in for 12, and we've got that gentleman from National.
Yeah.
That's right.
Cool. Oh,
We could do that first.
perfect. Just, we'll take 2 minutes, to quickly grab a cup of tea if anybody needs one, and then we'll do development contributions, Tom, and then the fees and charges.
I know what rationale
Very quickly and.
Development contributions. Are you what? Are we organised?
Yeah.
Right, thanks for changing the program. We've been, but if we go to the next slide, just got a quick agenda. What's outlined. Just want to take you through the draft changes to the water supply and wastewater and transport, your systems contributions. And then we have a bit more discussion around new construction, which is a new charge and proposed last time, and then next week. So for water supply, you can see a lot of red here, big uplifts due to the capital program. Greatest being here in Alexandria, going from 7.5 just over 22. So I guess we did after a reaction from the. I can hear about that.
There will be a substantial reaction, and to highlight, and I think you've covered this off before, Julie, there is no ability, you have to charge what it costs. And no ward or area can subsidise another one, is that right? That's why we can't have it as a district rate across each.
I mean, there's always the ability for us to look at the portion of charge. And what I would suggest is we actually get to the end and then decide where we're going to cover this, because while water supply might be high, another one might be low. So it's kind of the total that you want to probably look at rather than the individual breakdowns. But obviously, we've done a lot of work in the Alexandria area on water supply, and that's now coming through in the DC accounts, and the consequence of those projects costing money. So you're right, that's obviously a bit because that's not the result area coming through, and there's not many properties there. So 1% of that project being charged to grow actually results in what cost of that's very little properties, so there's money sitting on that's spread across a lot. So that's what you get in smaller towns. It doesn't take much percentage allocated to growth.
And at the moment, there's no ability for Aotearoa to be on an acceptable solution. That's a different option.
It costs us much because we've still got that. So, yes.
So we've been through a process with Julie reviewing their cost apportionments and done as much as we can there. The only other option you might want to consider is other councils have put caps in place and other previous policies where they say we're not going to chat much about this. The rest of it will come up by rates.
Yeah, my brain has it doesn't like it about that. Look, there's probably only 2 properties and 1 property a year, which is paid. But what I would say is look at the total at the end, and if the developer's not paying for it, the residents will pay for it. And the other thing is that, like in this last presentation, Tom gave a slide that showed we now do the same set relative to everybody else, and we were not here to our neighbours. So go.
Yeah, the next one is a similar slide for wastewater. Again, it's a big element here. Alex,
and once again, Alexandra is getting paid because we need to do the big upgrade at wastewater treatment plant here and also home council, this new site needed too. So that starts to come through. And when I was talking to TV the other day, they were saying we need infrastructural growth. And I was saying, well, the flip side of that is your DC's going to go right up.
On the flip side, when we look at the transport DC, which is the next one, it's actually coming down.
Wow. That'll be so close.
And I think that'll even come down further. We're still working through some funding system rate assumptions with the team. So that's like becoming solid.
Of course, $384 doesn't really offset $12,000. You know, we'll tax you when we can get it.
So if we move on, the new charge that we've been looking at for you to introduce is
around community infrastructure. And at our last session, we talked about whether we can charge them on a ward or a district-wide basis. What we've done is we've calculated both alternatives for you to consider. So ward-based contribution does have some variance across the wards, from being the highest, if you'd expect, and then it's down here. If we were to do a district-wide charge, it would be around that $6,000 no, but the team is still working through the detail of the growth percentages against projects in this one, so I think that's going to come down quite quickly. And the other thing we need to do is include the rural health situation. We'll be charging this to the rural. That'll bring that contribution down to maybe 3 or 4.
So at the moment, it's just been calculated based on the moving that is coming for it, but giving on incentive fund, we actually rate those activities across the whole piece.
And I think if you wanted to be consistent, now that we've made the decision to district-wide things, then I think for consistency's sake, you'd be wanting to consider this and that one, I would have thought. And then everyone's picked up, because everyone uses community facilities.
And it is feasible that you can live in Alexandra and go to a function and common form. So there is the ability there that whereas if you use a water now, it's using water and commerce and
Well, if it might be compulsory rather than feasible.
in saying that though, you do have more ability to challenge when you spread them over areas.
Yeah, so if we go to the next slide, I just wanted to highlight that risk that the legislation does say that you follow grouping by geographic area with avoids group across an entire district or even practical. So you have to sort of argue it's not practical.
Or a small enough population across a big enough area that is a reasonable argument, no?
I feel confident that we know that it's not practical for you to do it.
Not building any more bloody halls. No.
So the next slide was more discussion around that. We presented this last time, and the preference was to go for that one district. But now that you've seen the figures, I just want to get confirmation that you're still comfortable go down that path. Because it is an area that developers might challenge your policy on.
This was the point of district-wide funding. Yeah.
That's more.
Yeah, I don't say.
So the next decision, which we touched on last time as well, was whether we should be charging all land uses. The infrastructure. I think the direction was that everyone should contribute. We have gone to the next step and say how much should each land use contribute. That's our next. Is the work we need to move on. Then we go into parks and reserves, and we touched on this again last time as well about splitting it into 2 contributions. One around the reserve improvements, which is your capital programs that is going through the LTP. That's all your level of service, renewals and growth projects, parks and reserve space. And then a reserve land component, which is really around provision of new reserve land. And we have different methods, some contributions for those 2 different parts. The first part is, if you go to the next slide, it's very similar to how we do all the other activities. It's based on the capital program. And looking at your growth percentages of each projects and etc. So what I'm showing here is in the annual plan column, that's your existing FC charge, financial contribution, and the RMA. Just under $3,000 for urban and half that for rural properties. And this is how we come out on the wood base. If we do the districtised approach to around $500. That's quite a bit lower, but then you have to remember that we're proposing this reserve land provision component, which is on top of this. And this is the next slide is based around some level of service. And Gordon's working on a reserve land strategy at the moment. It talks about a desire for neighbourhood parks and perhaps around 20 square metres per dwelling provision. Yep. So then the next decision is, well, how do you accept land from the developer, or do you take cash? So you want to make sure you're accepting suitable land that's suitable for a neighbourhood park. So we can put some guide to what is acceptable land. And if it's a cash payment, you need to think about how you value that land. Some policies will do a site-specific valuation. I think the better approach is to agree some average land value, just charge that consistently. So I'm assuming here for these calcs that $8,500 a square metre is the average land value for suitable land in your district. And if you're trying to collect 20 square metres, that's 10,000 a lot. That is,
and that kind of policy that with land or cash is controlled by us, not by the.
Yeah, I propose that you should decide whether it's acceptable.
Yeah, sure.
You don't want rubbishy, unusable bits of land.
So it's still up.
It's both, so you pay the $500 for the sort of all the improvement works plus the building collect. Yeah, so. And then, like with community infrastructure, you've got the same decision. Do you go wood-based or district-based? I think for consistency, so that is the same as community infrastructure, go district-based. This is. Everyone agree with that? Yeah. And then, similarly again, the final thing is, who would you charge? You've probably got two options here for caps and reserves. Your status quo with the financial contribution in the urban and rural split, where we all pays. Or the alternative is to use a land use base consistent with all the other activities, it's residential, commercial option. My recommendation would be to go for option 2, be consistent with all the other contributions, and that's what allows you to do a rural urban split anyway through the conditions.
Which I think is probably more accurate, yeah, realistic. That option 2. They've not been changed for anything out the box, so.
And know that will be the.
Wayne, I've just emailed you an email that's got your emotion.
Right.
You can open the email. It's a table and then that's
Yeah,
got.
like many things going.
Give the money to stone.
This is kind of where the rubber hits the road.
It just sticks in.
We really need to understand a little bit about how much more Alexandra and Clyde will be paying versus Cromwell.
And why?
Well, why is because they've had a lot of work done. But there is the ability for me to go back and just nudge the percentage allocation slightly, that will bring it down. And this is not an exact science. So, you know, I do, it's better do it, see what it looks like, do it again, see what it looks like. So it's around the level of comfort, I think. Because Cromwell, I can't push Cromwell up anyway, because we actually try to find the portion that I can, but because there's so much road happening, well, the projects that are there for growth are being split across more properties. And then for, you know, the water treatment upgrades, not as expensive as Alexander's was, because it was a membrane and it was cartridge. So when it would be,
So the DCs on new developments and now it's implied are in direct relationship to what we're currently spent, I should say, on the water upgrades and what we plan on spending on wastewater.
yes, but then I still allocate a percentage of the growth component. It's just. That happened, well, I said it again, because then you get two. Oh,
Swings and roundabouts. Swings and roundabouts.
yeah. So,
When I seems to be all swinging one roundabout.
Yeah, they're all swinging against Cromwell.
Eh? Yeah.
we can afford it.
Against.
yeah, so I'll just.
Like double
that
tax.
as cost about screening about. Alexander applied a total development contribution of around $44,000. And for the Johnson.
So just actually that's 44,000 plus the reserve land, which could be about 10K.
Per section.
Getting up there now, isn't it?
So it's, yeah.
That's,
Now we're interested.
Go against everything that we've done in relation to our, the
Spatial plan.
spatial plan, thank you. That goes completely against what we've just set up in the spatial plan.
What, in terms of charging so much money?
Yeah, so if you're looking at 50 or 60,000, then you take the smaller, we're setting our spatial plan that we want to condense things in.
Yes.
So that's the cost of the.
Yeah, and I don't
Because
disagree.
if they don't pay it, the ratepayer pays.
Yeah, you pay it when you've moved in anyways.
When we look at Alexander's wastewater treatment, it's $32 million. I had to assign a percentage of it to Brighton. You know, so it's, there'll be bits of it that we'll say, okay, if there is a project, we'll need to build another pipeline across the river. And clearly that's for growth, because we can head it across there now. So we only need another pipeline for growth. So we put a really high percentage on it, but the plant itself would be a level of compliance. And then, so it's not exact, I can massage it a bit.
And if the growth.
But you're not gonna massage at $20,000. It's gonna be the cost of.
No, I think that's what I'm asking.
Cost.
Look, I think we've, you know, at 30,000, you're not 34, you're not out of proportion.
No, absolutely not.
The way I like to sense to you that you're going to develop a rural property and put your own septic tank and your own water tanks and stuff. It's going to cost you everything. And that's.
Absolutely so.
Yeah.
So, because over here, they go down from there, so that's Alexandra the highest at 44,300. Cromwell's 34,117. Ren goes to 29,900. And then you get down to Renfrew is 11,000, Ross was 13,000, Mace is 18,000.
Yeah.
It's in line with what we pay. Still,
And then possibly 10,000 on top of that.
Yeah.
you're looking at 50K for Alex and Clive
Yeah.
on future developments post LTP.
And if I could, research the water and the wastewater ones to bring them down to more aligned with Cromwell. That's probably not a question. I don't think it's anyone that, differential with Alexander.
Because what was Cromwell's, Alex and Clyde was 44 and what was Cromwell?
34.
I think probably realistically for those two towns, they need to be closer together.
Why? Rationale, excuse me, rationale for that?
I would think in terms of promotion of growth across both areas. I don't know. I recognise the cost is the cost and it is where it falls and a lot of money's been spent in this area and it should be picked up. But I can hear what people are going to say. Once again, then it depends on who you talk to. This council hates Alexandra and want everything to go to Cromwell, which is
The
not being done.
development, this district and districtising everything. Cromwell is the bank that subsidises the other wards. So you can't sort of fight one way with this and slice it.
Well, yes and no. Cromwell and Vincent's contribution to the economy is almost equal.
Most of the bid, when we do this again, in 2 years' time, when we're reviewing the other programs, what's actually the infrastructure for growth and promise no increase. And the reason I suspect that is because we don't yet have the waste for hydraulic modelling. So I put some polling numbers in. I suspect we're going to find the whole of the capacity issues in volume that we're then going to have to invest in, which we might have been collecting the DCs. You know, so I think probably Alexander's being hit for something that Cromwell's not being hit for. So there is a wee bit of anybody but
And just an observation, the Alex charge is driven more by the historic spend in the future, and it's the opposite of problem. And that would suggest you might be optimistic on your future spend, and it'll cost you more than your budget.
What you're saying is over time, it's to equalise, and to equalise. So if you pick a point of time, so that's unfair, it's just not a good argument.
Yeah, and I wish it was a really nice, precise calculation that I could sit and say, this is the way it is, but it's just not.
When will you have that information that the
Not to 2027.
So,
you know.
When you look at the difference between Alex and Cromwell, it's very similar to what it was previously, 23,000 versus 22,000. They're both within Kiwi for a percentage increase. It's just the total figure that comes out so much higher.
And to give you an example, previously when we bought this, Omacare had $25,000 just in the wastewater. So, you know, we kind of adjusted that. We thought, oh, that's probably not. The other thing that happens is if we have too high a DC allocated, and then we don't get the number of sections we've based it on, we actually end up with a DC deficit, and that's part of the reason why we've got some deficits in our DC accounts at the moment. So I do have a wee bit of concern around risk of having accounts out a little bit too high.
Yeah, that's my concern, is that because it's so up there, it's going to have an impact on what the developers propose doing, and you won't get the income. Still going to do the work.
What's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of resource consents arriving during.
Yeah.
certainly is.
Yep.
Completed mine.
But it should start us away from, I mean, we have to review our development contribution policy. We have to do the detailed analysis to formulate the policy. This is the outcome of that.
And if you look at those proposed development contributions in the percentage of the overall cost of a section and building, just nothing much has changed. You know, as a percentage, it's extremely small, and it's probably in proportion to the rise in section prices and building prices.
Depending on where you're looking. In terms of the built section prices, because they're quite different in Alexandra compared to Cromwell, and probably lucky that Teviot's freed up all that space under the spatial plan with the aspirational goals.
So on those basis, there could be another line there though for the land, isn't it? $10,000 in there for land.
Correct.
And when does that get decided?
You're giving us a
Well,
guide.
we just said
as part of the LTP. We're quite involved in this. I think it's actually going to be in the conservation.
It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look, the developers will challenge us, and that's fine, but we're reasonably confident in the numbers, what have got us to this point today.
I guess what we really want is really good people, clear steer. Do you want these, you know, do you want me to go and look at the numbers? Because it's just tinkering now.
Well, and tinkering is not going to make a substantial difference. And probably fair to be going at the consultation with these are what the numbers actually are. This is the cost of building in this area. in terms of the impact on our infrastructure that everybody pays for.
But how fair is it that Alexander's had a historical force that Cromwell was about to have?
Well, that Cromwell number will go up. It's going to go through the roof. Just like ours, it's just we've already built the infrastructure in Clyde now. That's Cromwell's is coming, so theirs might be 34 now, but in 2 years' time it might be 50.
Correct.
It's a point in time thing, Jason, because change.
You can only charge for what's in.
With the land, contribution, how is it, I guess I understand if you're gonna do a willing tree with hundreds of sections, how does that compare to mum and dad who are subdividing their section off in comparison?
It's probably more likely for the living tree example that you accept land, you will have sufficient land and.
Which are
Whereas mum and dad won't have that, so you'll be taking cash.
Which is the practical option, because you don't want 2 metres here and 6 metres there, and you can't do anything.
Very.
Material.
Then we'd have to mow it.
Unless it's in the- because we can't be
You
on-
don't want to without that debate.
Yeah, I take Tracy's comment about, I've got friends who are sitting on 1,000 square metre section of prison when plan change 19 is allowing them to basically chop in half, sell the back off, they'll be mortgage free and be able to retire. This is in effect going to reach the 50,000, well, it's going to take 50,000 plus dollars off their bottom line, off their return. Yeah.
This question is, they're still going to make on it.
Yeah.
It's just going to be, and that becomes a big price for, mum and dad that are chopping in half to carry until they sell. And will that become a barrier to people subdividing their
And that's my worry, is that we have a real problem with affordability. And I don't know if there is no other answer.
Is there any way to, when people have to pay them, is when they get title or when they put in their resource consent? Is there a way for that to be pushed out to a sale?
Stage. So, there is ability to do that.
But the problem though is that if you push it out, the reality then is, and if they resource consent and they don't build until the latter stage of resource consent, construction costs have gone up.
Yeah.
We've booked them at a rate that was 3 years ago, so it's already they're getting a discounted price. If we push it out another 2 years, just use an arbitrary number, there's our ratepayer picks up all that additional cost from inflation. And QP's got an answer.
Yes, and this is something, so 2 to 4 is typically the last point, whole point in this, so they'll go to commission to be a piece of land that they have subdivided and it's sort of the last piece of the puzzle. That's the last whole point for council around, so if the 2 to 4 is issued, there's no
Lose leverage once they've got time. And you're dealing with the new homeowner and all those sorts of things, so that's.
So is it the developer who should be paying and what is it?
Which is what the punters keep telling us.
The developer seeks the cost of the section based on what the market will really can get for it. And people who are buying it who still have a $50,000 seat to pay at building consent stage, they're going to get paid for that on top of the house. So it's kind of typically most people feel, well, the developer, we have less even a good developer than we do with the building owner.
And the other key is that your debt funding, your structure, you're carrying that interest burden for a lot longer, right, until you can see and go.
Right.
Yeah, I've got no.
Is that a sufficient steer from the?
You're as Paul now.
Thank you, Julie.
And feeling real worried about some of the other things, there's gonna be so much to look forward to.
Yeah.
If you think of it this way, do you want to charge the developer or do you want to charge the ratepayers?
Yeah.
Essentially what we're asking.
Understand, because you're looking at it.
Yeah, developers hate,
And the big bit of.
they have hated DC since the very day. Remember our very initial conversations around this table 20 odd years ago, when development contributions came in as a tool in our toolbox, and they hated us then, and they'll just continue to hate us.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Thomas, being the bearer of such wonderful news.
Yes.
Cheryl and Nigel, do you guys need to get away?
Yes. Sorry, I
Oh, no, it's all right. I know you're saying it's
There's an element of sadness to that time, isn't it? Yeah.
Do you want to do an introduction?
I'll read this.
I think my idea is to so, if you like, I said before, we did a really good review of ours last year to make sure we were using fees income that we could. I don't see the rates as. So this year, we really largely we've done with inflation and right around so there's a couple of outliers in there. And we've got a new one for people that want to put a education in to build over a yes, yes, time to me to dollars, which I say such we've also compared our, so we compared our fees and charges to QLDC. So I feel the name is just us checking off while we have, I think we can. The ones that kind of are coming through as a big change are the bulk, the water take, water money. So there's two different ways, apart from going through a meeting on property, there's two other ways we sell water. One is tankers giving water to use on developments and things like that. So they're not paying the ULC and they're only taking that a tanker load at a time. So we put that one up. That's Chantal will have looked at documents and charging the bank as well. They have the choice of not taking treated water. They can treated activity and we encourage them to do that. And for the bulk water supply, these are properties that, like our Upper Cottage Road, are an example where they've got their own program reticulation groups where they have a single meter that they take from. So we've adjusted that based on the $2.42 rate plus the not paying base. So that's a new calculation. So the next slide, please. The others, these no rate changes, we've added in an extra rate for our asset data to review and process asset data. So that's charging the developers for that processing of their asset data at independent sense. And that's just trying to look how it's beyond stock costs. And then the development charges, obviously, we just had that conversation, but these were set, these have been changed. What we how come their last year's well, we haven't put in the new rates that we've just been discussing because we still going through the calculations of development contributions, so we didn't have that data put into the fees and charges yet. And then the last slide for 3 waters is nothing really significant, and then actually a couple of drops down, but because of the USC going down, we don't charge as much to properties that are connected, but that they can be connected, but they can be connected. They're legally required to pay that. But what we haven't really been doing particularly well is we are able to charge people who connect partway through a year for the cost of providing service through that year. So we'll that we paragraph in there has actually been in our basic charges before, so we're going to be more diligent and following through on when someone gets a new connection, making sure that the remaining numbers of that because they're getting it from prior to the next.
So that's the guy who used me a couple of weeks ago, who's investing in some properties and that he sold within Clyde, is paying those charges, because he might not really use it.
Yes.
Essentially, so that's, yeah.
They're paid, yeah. When they service the bill but not coming back on board, would be that, and this is an related legislation.
Yeah.
When will that levy for Te Mata Arawai and the Commerce Commission be going in?
I think it's in the budget, so really apparently finance team, and I just need to look at us split it up. This legislation has certain percentage goes to school and a certain percentage goes to we can't pass the figures, can't pass it.
Yeah, do we know what the amount is for our?
It's off my memory, it's around $132,000 and they charge it based on the population of the district. So we will make a submission on that because obviously as rural districts, we have greater proportions of our populations and not connected to metropolitan. Yes, so we're paying the levy on people. And that's me.
Thank you.
So it's environment.
Now the department, another levy from central government. Or
It
left.
does add to it, yes. So first one is, the purchase at the top there, the 442 and 465 for general waste charge by weight per tonne. That is the makeup of our landfill cost, our transport cost, our operation of the transfer station in proportion to that part of the rate. That is a pass-through cost. And that shift is just inflation, our CPI adjustment, and that basically an emissions trading spend adjustment. The green waste shift by weight by tonne, that 85 to 105 shift is, so we shred and mulch that green waste and we've been getting rid of that off that site. Historically, has been stockpiled on site. There is an additional cost in getting some of that material off site where we can't give it away. We do have to transport and we've got some rural properties accepting that to alleviate that problem and that stockpiling at that transfer station, but that is passing on. We've got a good 12 months of cost of what it has been for the last 12 months, passing that cost on. That will come down, will likely come down with the introduction of the organics processing chemical solution, because all that green waste will go through that plant to be transported off-site or given away for free because they actually have a value.
And that's the mulch we were giving away from our.
And Alexandra, yeah, so we had the giveaway mulch day, and then previously, the Alexandra mulch has been used for some beautification on site, as well as, we've had an operator, just doing the transport only rate to individuals if they want some of it for themselves, and the quality is actually really, really good.
All the mulch up in the pines for the new development zone. People are asking me.
Private mulch by, I think there's a little bit of council mulch, and that would be a David question or Gordy question around the stuff on the council side of the fence, but the other side would be private.
Yeah, there's a lot of it.
Yes. And then the other charges are just those charges apportioned based on where we don't have a weighbridge. Tyres through the tyre wise disposal plan has actually no cost, so it's just noted there. And clean full hard full increase is just around that transport cost increase and removing that to a proper clean full hard full facility. Next slide. That, so hazardous waste is just a shift, inflationary shift across the year for those different products. Obviously, that's a
mothballs.
Yeah, do you know that there's mothballs in somebody's rubber? You won't.
You won't. But if
they just go into general waste.
Yeah.
But if they want to bring their little thing in mothballs and.
Yeah, they typically should be spoken of. And unfortunately, some people do put hazardous waste through general waste, which is not ideal, and we absolutely encourage people not to, because there's actual ways to dispose of that material. So how we collect and handle anything on that list is slightly different, obviously, than just putting it in the bins that will get to Victoria Flats. So that's actually set up with a proper way of managing it and a proper collection.
What do you think? It's like it's on weight.
Yes. I believe several litres, sorry.
For which one, sorry, Matt?
Thanks.
Thank
I know, that's right. I will clarify that and have that added in brackets to it, so it's very clear.
Yeah. I just want to know that with my other hat on, we took a whole bunch of stuff down there in the other sheet.
Yeah.
Paint, and it was $300 to get rid of it, so I'm assuming it's on way.
I thought it was per tin or per container.
I know it shifted, it was one, and
That's a while ago, it's what.
that makes sense previous.
Just, yeah.
Just should be, so,
Otherwise you.
is there one more there? Did you just double, do two?
Die.
No, okay. E-waste disappeared. So e-waste changes is on there as well. It's got itemized, so your CRT, TVs, printers, everything like that. There is no shift in any of those fees and charges at all in that space. And through the waste levy, we are still funding that transport. So people are paying the same disposal costs as if they took to the actual site clearing, say to need or price to ship those facilities. We're actually covering through our waste levy that transport costs to encourage people to bring that to a transfer station, so the right way. Those are the shipping wheelie bin charges, and that's just the pass-through cost of the cost to collect that bin, the cost to dispose of the contents of that bin, transport, and those items as well. So there's small inflationary based shifts. Next slide. Roading is largely all inflationary based. Shifts with the exception of some new charges, which appear on next slide. And that's around heavy vehicle permits. So users with heavy vehicles that are overweight essentially have to apply for a permit application to CVC. Previously, we had not charged for that, so those permits come and say someone bring something really big through our district, and then if they're going over any bridges or anything like that, where there could be risk that we want a structural engineer to actually have a look at how their loads loaded, what their actual weight on the car and everything like that. We're looking to charge for that, and that aligns with all of the districts around us and actually charging for that.
Yeah, that'd be critical going forward.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that in a number of places where people bring stuff through, and there's also just actually itemizing if you have applied for a permit but then overload the processing structure or without bringing a number of things, there's some incentive in the end to do it, and obviously just some clarity around the fees and charges. The other piece is we've added a $30 admin fee to our commercial fingerboard sign. So if someone wants a winery sign or anything, there's a price to purchase that sign and installation of that sign, and then obviously just the signs back off. And the other one is application for inclusion on notice rate register. So that's looking at introducing, so at the moment it's paper-based maps, which can result with, if there's changing staff on the contractor side or anything like that, someone's no spray zone being sprayed. So looking at improving the technology we have around that, either through an electronic resource or say each market post with no spray start finish. So it's very clear for the contractors out on site, so we don't accidentally spray someone's property that might be near some horticultural verticulture that they do not want to be sprayed or anything like that. And then obviously the development contributions for roading will get input once that's balanced.
What change?
For the DC for roading?
Yeah.
That's just
That's what we just did.
$300,000, and it's just around obviously our capital program, improving the program has been trimmed and recognition of the environment we're in, no extra cycling bridge crossings and different things like that, trimmed vehicles. We have a thorough review of what our current percentages are and financial assistance rate assumptions with rationale.
What's going to be the impact of the waste levy changes on those numbers potentially?
For waste,
That government changes to the waste levy stuff that's been out the last couple of days that doesn't look flash for us.
correct. Until we know more, so the risk is they change what we get as part of the waste levy. So obviously we pay on every tonne that goes to landfill, and then we get some of that back. At the moment, that's about $200,000 to $300,000 a year. That is funding our enviro schools contract, and it's funding our waste minimisation officer is two of the big committed things. It's funding our transport of e-waste, some of our rate recycling options outside of the norm that we have at our transfer station as well, like batteries and cell phones and different things like that. The biggest risk to me is losing our the funding that have support staff that we do actually have as part of the team, doing an absolutely fantastic job, as well as the EnviroSkills contract, who the EnviroSkills team through Reeve do an absolutely fantastic job in that education space. So yeah, it's a little bit of wait and see where that goes, but we're advocating to at least keep a significant portion of that to that list that we're doing in that space.
Thank you.
Sorry, so the building, the only changes that you can see in front of you there is just where there was a couple of fees that were transposed for the fees and charges. And so we're not looking to change any of the building consent fees and charges this year, because of the surplus that we recall that we talked about previously during this LTP process, basically. The rest that you can see on this page at the moment are just inflationary increases in relation to the work that we're doing for that. Next page, please. And the same again for these works that we're doing here. One that I will draw your attention to is that new MPI annual levy. So thankfully, MPI are over the next 3 years, they're introducing a new levy and they're doing it step by step. And so it's around about the short one, we had a workshop earlier in the year. And so for this year, it's around about that sort of $60 mark. I'll explain why it's 78 in a second. And next year, it will go up to about 100, and the following year, it'll be about $130, $140, basically. Then the numbers that were quoted originally, that the ministry gave us, they didn't add GST. So recently, they've just decided that there will be GST added onto that. And they have advised that we should be around about an $11 collection fee, because we have to collect this levy on their behalf. And so that includes the $11 plus GST into that to make it 78. Next year, that will go up to about 100 and something. And let's say the following year, that will be about $130, $140 for that levy. Again, just coming down to the bylaw policy side of things, of just inflation free. However, the class 4 one, that fee may not be required depending on the outcome of the gambling policy that would be in consultation of the community. That sort of things what I put that in anyway. Next page, please. And so these are all new. And the reason I put these in here is, again, it's part of the conversations that we've had earlier in the year. We talked about alcohol licensing and whether or not we were looking at having bylaw to set our own fees. And no, we're not going to do that. These are all set in statutes, but we've never really included it in our fees and charges. I know it's set in statute, but I just think for clarity for our community, just to include them in there. So they are as per what we've always been charging since the regulations came in, but it's just to add them in so there's clarity for all of those basically. Next page, please. Again, same story for the noise control side of things, where you will see increases obviously on those contractor charges. Now we've got a contract with that expires halfway through next year. All conversations with them, with their costs, these are the indication, arguably for animal control, also for noise. Should they go around to?
I take be twice as quick.
Weeks too.
I'll carry on. And these are what they're indicating to. There's the cost that they're going to be charging us, so that's just how we charge them.
Yeah, did I miss something just then about fees and charges? Why is Ramsley twice the price of Alex? Did I miss that?
That's because of the cost of getting there.
Yeah.
But isn't planning and regulatory districtisation? Why would it be? It was just a cost of council or to the ratepayer.
So
That's the contractor charge.
These are the costs that are passed on to us due from our contractors.
So that, but the average is the cost will be the same to the resident.
So when we linked in with our contractors to say what is the cost that they're going to charge us to deliver the service that we require, those are the costs that they're quoting us.
Oh yeah, right. Cool.
Moving on to subdivision, so these are deposits, as we can see, they've always been deposits. What we've done is just have a rationalisation, looking at what are the average costs, and so to try and give a bit more of an indication as to, you get $2,500 plus whatever the actual costs are. So we're increasing those to what is more realistic, just setting that expectation for the customers as to what their costs are going to be for their consent, basically. Next page, please. Again, the top one there that you can see, that is a larger increase, but that is more appropriate to what we're seeing. We're seeing the average cost of consents and the time that the team are spending on those consents. That is what we're seeing. One of the other focuses that we've got for the planning team as well this year is to ensure that we are actually charging for the time that the team spend on it. That should be borne by the consent holder, not by ratepayers, basically. So that links into this conversation. And most of those are remaining the same. Next page, please. All parts are interesting.
Thank you.
We'll come on to property office.
You can just stay
That's
here.
another question.
David.
Maybe I'll talk to.
Put them all up my heels.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Lovely. Right. Doing this live. It's pot charges, which is essentially that's just general inflation against memorial standard plot fees and things. Now, burial fees, our policy is to essentially net zero it. So these are costs that have gone up from our contractors. We didn't really adjust it much last year, but that is a direct contractor charge for the district at $1,800. And that's more or less, it's still slightly cheaper than other councils, but that's sort of why that's jumped up to the $400 is the direct, direct cost.
Variable fees have gone up for it.
Yeah. And that's the direct cost of, fuel, labour, all of that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Next slide. So, just a small change for, I guess, inflation across the district. Now, what we have done as well is, given we have moved to district funding, as you'll see, sort of seasonal rates and things like that, there was a charge, not too much, but there are overs and unders around all of our fees and charges. And so we've just taken a district-wide approach. So somebody who's paying in Ranfurly would pay the same as someone who's paying in Cromwell, given we've gone for that district-wide approach now. So we've just set sort of one fee for places which seems sort of quite fair. We've looked at people paying slightly different around the district. So, and I think this is obviously the first time that we're doing it. So this year, as this rolls out, we'll get a bit of a feel of how that works, and if that was on the money when it comes to charges. But it seems to sort of be fair for the whole district. So yeah.
Can we volumetric charge the shells? For the next one.
We might have to soon.
So have you had any pushback from any of those clients in relation to the current prices?
No. And the first, they went up last year, they sort of went up a little bit last year. Most of them will sort of see them roughly around the same here. Some will be slightly cheaper, some slightly more cheaper.
When we stopped charging for the juniors,
When do
we stopped charging for juniors.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
correct. Yeah.
And that was what the sports clubs really sought, and
Yeah.
the schools really sought.
Yeah.
And so the costs fell on those who could afford it higher.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we did the same with the pools to the fives, I think, is what we did there. So yeah.
And it makes a difference.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah. Especially like
When I'm thinking 4 children times 15 sports. You're not charging the grounds if you keep it that way.
And then some of the specific things, again, district-wide, but like Anderson Park's the same price as Alpha Street sort of thing, which is, you can see there's not too many, there's sort of an increase in inflation, just rounded off to that sort of 600.
I got billed for 3 hours of the use of Centennial Park for Rotten Festival for Mardi Gras this year. I agree that it was stopping because it's not listed on there
Yeah, right.
right?
Yeah.
And stuff, you know, kicked it back.
Yeah.
There needs to be a separate line item because it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
The seating part's got power and it's quite popular.
Yeah.
You need to figure out what you're going to charge for it.
Okay, awesome. Take it away.
I mean, it could potentially be. And and also it's probably some thought now also with the new development down the bottom end of Tower Street with the.
Yeah.
Okay. If that gets commercial use, because that ideally, I mean, the warehouse car park could become market size.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, it's just something to keep in mind. That's
Some food trucks and things.
Food trucks, yeah.
And one of the other things we're working on is, you know, sort of sponsorship opportunities in the pool. We're not at a place yet where we can present that year, so we'd likely maybe bring a paper back through the year or for the next annual plan, but there are, a couple of things there.
About hockey, and seeing any of the. Is it should be?
The turf truck and Cromwell is a separate entity we charge. Yeah, actually, it's a positive net contribution to the reserves.
Yeah.
By about 3 or 4 grand this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we charge privately and.
Yeah.
Put money in the council office.
Yeah, fun as it own. What have we got here? Big fruit. So again, just some inflation. The next one down, just this finds that hasn't moved for years for not for profit. That's just changed for, I guess, you guys to consider, but it's sort of been $50 for years and just moving it to 100, and 100 sort of more covers the cost of turning the sides up and down. You know, just a bit more realistic. Still obviously quite cheap. Just the other little sorry, just on the Ranfurly pool. You will note just the season pass down the bottom. That's for 2 adults and 2 kids at $118. But it's something that we haven't looked at for a long time, and so. I'm just proposing moving from 118 to 150, and then potentially the next year just to bring it a little bit more in line with what it costs for an adult season pass. And so an adult season pass is 100 or 110. So for a family, it's 150. And then the following year, I propose that we moved it up again. I mean, you guys might want to maybe give me guidance to just jump it up to something a bit more realistic.
What's your simple parents? That's the one.
And then just an adult increase, $5.50, just moving that to $6. Round numbers, save change at reception.
There's no other pools, is it? Because the other ones are the same.
Yeah, I think they were there, weren't they?
It's not up there yet.
No, I haven't seen.
We put them up before them.
There's that. So why that's not gone up is because we put them up last.
They've already gone up, so we did.
Yeah, so there's actually no change to those this year because we jumped it up.
We moved it in.
Yeah.
Is the whole full hire in this? Only because schools have approached about the cost of hiring all of Molyneux Pool and Cromwell Pool for a school event.
Yeah.
Is becoming prohibitive, and they want the ability to submit on that because it's been to the point where they say they won't be able to hold school events if they have to hire the entire pool, and they're arguing that they're usually hiring at a time when you'd only have a few people through during the day.
Yeah.
And that if they're paying $700 or $800, that's not necessarily reflective of the lost opportunity for income for the pool.
Okay, cool. No, then, so what to go specific lane hire, like 4 lanes?
The late hire, so if they're hiring the whole pool for the day or half a day, what do you think? They're saying, well, should we be paying that much when council wouldn't get that amount of income from the afternoon of 5 people swimming or whatever it be?
Yeah.
And is there the opportunity for them to have a different rate as opposed to a private hire if there was a school or not-for-profit rate?
I might just take that away because we do have a schools rate. So we might just take away what the thing is. That's right.
Okay, do people want some lunch has been made available, which is wonderful. I'm sure it's a very cheap lunch. Do you want to grab it now and keep going? Apparently it's hot, so grab it now and keep going. No, you definitely don't want that while we're talking
Is it
about.
very to sit here just for lunch and then softball?
So just take 30 seconds
Yeah, no.
and grab something
No
and then.
transparently.
Set charge to replacement cost. I think that was it.
That would be right.
So, is any other, anything else for me? Yeah, with just comments on. Yeah,
For that,
every day.
perfect, thank you.
Especially the one day.
All yours.
Right, I guess, and Jack will jump in. The thing sort of bring it out is that the vast majority of what we'll be looking at in the pages are inflationary linkers, effectively, but the non-commercial one, that perspective. The commercial result is what we propose is around about 10%. Versus the non-commercial one about 3% basically to align what the actual costs are in my perspective, which is the first slide of what you're seeing. Next slide, please.
It's very great for the community stuff. You think that I've been there.
334.
Talking about moving on to the always kind of recommended and that, yeah, that's not commercial rights too much. So, for commercial, would be, yeah. It's not often seen, you know, things do like it's down in the non-commercial rate. It's almost like getting out of the beginning trend.
Next slide, please.
Yeah, so.
Again, this is just an information, there's not a new one to the side here, there's some that we will talk a bit more to very shortly as we get to the next slide, but this is just to make you aware that inflation rate increases that we've got on these pages here. Next slide, please. And the same again here, so something. Next slide, please.
So the difference now, we talk to these committees and we're putting the fees and charges for halls that are run by committees and our fees and charges. So it makes it a lot more transparent for the committees and also the users, so that when they're on the website, they can see the fees and charges, nobody will contact. Whereas we didn't have that before. So that's why you're seeing no figures that need for 24, 20, 25. It's new charges.
I guess just to preface the conversation that you'll get in a week's time of the horse report that we will be getting in relation to which buildings have been retained by that. This becomes important then of we look to retain, I'll like to keep in place for them. Next slide, please.
So again, that's the same as we just previously talked about. They will implement fees and charges and they wouldn't have been on the website, but they should be. And then the Alexandria Airport, now this is a new charge that Tara has put in there. We've got quite a nice free room up there, so if it's being used, we should be charging. So. Yes, 3% increase at 10% for commercial users. Excellent. Aerosol, again, this is the ones that we didn't have again. And over, yeah, terrace over in Auburn.
These are all new ones that we haven't had included previously, but we feel should be in there. Depending on the conversation that comes with it.
So what's your definition? Have you got a pretty clear definition of non-commercial or commercial?
Yeah.
Very easy to understand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the time we can perhaps in.
Next slide, please. Same conversation again. And the next slide. Again, these are just the increases.
Oh, was the Cromwell Memorial, we separated out the meeting room and interview room. The fees that were there were increased, because one room is a lot bigger than the other. So we addressed that, just trying to recognize the fees. And this is it.
Next slide, please.
no changes in, apart from the inflation.
Yep. With it.
Thank you.
I think even didn't go for the company.
Well, nothing really there though.
Well, the health of the either levels.
Thanks, Lee and Janice.
Thank you.
The administration fee. We don't tend to use the, so I'm proposing to increase it. Now, what it's for is, we get a lot of people that accidentally pay us, rather than like LIC is the non-DC. And the bulk of it is due to the error. Just the backstop, if we had someone who was doing really frequently and we talked to them and we're going to change their behaviour. So I don't contemplate making that claim with this in the 2 years yet, but hence why we haven't really proposed to increase it because it's just a one that will be the case. What I have done, I went on special calculator, government calculator, like the other GM, I just run inflation adjustment through this. That complete copy of the grid, that's mainly real estate agents that request that and done an adjustment for inflation. Again, for the custom maps and electronic copies of burials, it really does depend on what they need and we just do a price as per cost for that. Predictions has gone up for $1. And the final one there, this is when it's going to take us a long time to do an official information request. Councils have the ability to charge for that. It's to stop sort of the real nuisance complaints and stuff that really is quite intensive. Yeah, $38. It has been reviewed in many years. Nathan understands that it will be reviewed, probably not in time for our LTP, but as we do the fees and charges every year, we will, our proposal is to keep it the same, keep it in line with the guidelines, and changes would bring that back in the first year of the AUP. And that's my area in difference.
Thank you.
That's us.
Is that it?
Was it the input? Oh, you need to go, Sarah. You go.
Yes, sorry, I'm being right.
Two items that required to cover ETs.
Yeah. Easy. We've got a dwindled council, but that's all right. We'll carry the burden of the absentee.
Those,